over in a different place. Just shit, I'm just standing here and I'm going, hell with this. But just see that smoke. Oh, yeah, you sure do. Yeah, boy.
Yeah, yeah, I don't. It's still so good. I'm not. There you go. Yeah, I couldn't. Don't you? No, I'm not. I'm not lying.
Don't believe in trips, huh?
All right, before Bradley and them get into it, let's say the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank y'all. Glad to see y'all here with us tonight. If, someone, I think we wanna make a little switcheroo down in our regular agenda, is that right, Randy? Yes, please. Okay, we got all our, land preservation, people, volunteers to help us with that here, so we're gonna move them up, get them freed up. We'll go Carl Shaw, and then regular agenda on down. Everybody okay with that?
We're also removing D.
Moving D,
Removing.
removing D, gotcha. There we go. I thought there was something to that. Okay, moving D, still good? Someone make a motion with those, amendments to it, we'll,
So moved.
thank you, Jeff. Second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Sandra. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, public comment. Did we have anybody sign up? I'll go grab it. I'll go grab it.
I'm first on there anyway.
Oh, okay, just go for the mic.
You want these?
Yes, thank you, sir.
We turned on here?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you talking about?
Yes, a little bit else too, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
If that's all right, Randy.
Okay.
I know you. Okay.
I was gonna say wait.
Yes, sir.
So it's that time that we're talking about it.
If it's all right, I'll skip over most of that.
Okay.
Perfect.
Whatever else you've got.
Perfect.
Please, thank
A little bit. Thank you, Brian Ross, 16 Schoolhouse Road. Want to say a couple things. One, the other night at the volunteer appreciation dinner, really appreciate that. Those of us who volunteer don't do it for that, but it was nice to see the town together, good food. Really appreciate Daniel and Mayor Gantz recognizing the staff. I thought that was a great addition. I don't think we recognize the five of you. Y'all are fools for doing this, but we we appreciate it. Thankless and tough. I really do appreciate it. And the other things that you do that we don't even see. Randy heading up the Land Preservation Board and James participating in that, greatly, greatly appreciated. I know they're going to talk a little bit about the land preservation later. I'm excited about it, extremely excited about it. As you know, I'm on the planning board. 2 nights ago, we talked a little bit about that. Got into a little bit of the future land use map, got into the comprehensive plan, the Mills River, and it's apparent to me that we all have the same hope that we preserve a lot of this land in this town. And I'm becoming the majority of this town, that I'm not from here, but I moved here for that same reason that you guys don't move away. And I see the plan, I see the land use map, I see this board, the Land Preservation Initiative, and I see a bit of a natural conflict there in our zoning, the Mills River mixed use specifically. And, you guys know I'm a real estate agent. I own a company. I make more money the more we develop, but I don't want it here in my backyard. I really want to pump the brakes on this. So I hope that y'all are open to advising us, the planning board, as residents. Michael's looking into what questions we're allowed to ask. We'd want to do it by the book. But I'm really afraid, we're going to be a mini, Fletcher Arden's coming right here, and we're going to look just like that. Or worse, a Sevierville or something like that. So I hope as you guys can advise us, once we find out more of what we're allowed to ask, I hope the town council is really with us on looking at that zoning. So, thank you guys.
I've got, is it Eric Plumps?
All right. I want to echo some of what Brian just said, and that's a big thanks for what you all do. We really appreciate it as a resident of Mills River. Not a native, but moved to Henderson County in 2002 or 3, something like that, and over to Mills River in 2017. Love it here. And it's, again, the reason why y'all don't leave and why I'm here. But I do want to talk tonight. I want to talk about soccer. And I'm on the board for HFC Henderson County. We have a lot of different soccer organizations in the county. I don't think it's Mills River's responsibility to solve fields for everybody. It's not. But I'd like for you all to be part of the solution, if that's a possibility. I know y'all got the feedback from the surveys about what to do with the acreage that was just purchased behind Town Hall here. I think, from my understanding, the commissioners are trying to find 40 acres and put a whole sportsplex and 4 soccer fields and all that stuff. I'm not sure that jives with Mills River. And I love soccer. And we have 1,500 soccer kids in Henderson County. And I was just talking to Nicole about what do the fields look like over here. They're pretty beat up. And we go over to Jackson Park right now. Jackson Park grass is about as smooth as that desktop that y'all are at. I mean, it's rough. There are a lot of kids playing, and there is not enough room to put these kids on for programming. Families want to get their kids outside. They want to get them into recreation activities like that. What I am suggesting to the county commissioners is, hey, maybe looking for Jackson Park Part 2 is akin to trying to find a unicorn. They don't exist. It's not 1970. And so maybe instead of a unicorn, we can find 2 horses, right? And as a resident of this side of the county, I'd love to see something on this side of the county, whether that's in Mills River, a couple of fields maybe, or, kind of in our little sister city that I used to live in, which is Town of Fletcher. And so whether it's here or whether it's there, I'm telling you, Henderson County residents need, the kids, the families, they need a place to play soccer. And I don't think it's Mills River's responsibility to solve it. But as leaders in this community, I hope that you help us to resolve it. And that might be leaning on the commissioners and making some suggestions, talking with your counterparts across the river in the town of Fletcher, finding out what suggestions they might be able to offer. Because those residents on Taproot, they're going to be piling into this park, and they're going to be piling into Fletcher Park. And, where's the county money on this side of the county for parks? It's been non-existent, and we need it on this side of the county somewhere. So thank you.
Anyone else for public comment while it's open? If you would give us your name and where you live, please.
Lisa Marino, and I live in Mills River. And I'm also on the planning board with Brian. And I didn't get to hear the full of his comments, but I just wanted to echo them to the extent that I heard what you were saying. And hopefully, I think this is in line with what he was saying as well. you know, as we look at the future land use map for Mills River and how it does seem to be inconsistent with the zoning that we have available, and the overlay there. And I also served on the land committee, which I know will be coming up later this evening to talk about as well. And again, it seems inconsistent with Mills River's vision to preserve open space and also have, you know, not another alternative other than mixed use for so much of our town. So again, I just wanted to kind of echo my support for what Brian also said and kind of let it be known that at least another member of the public here also has that same view and would love to take guidance in maybe ways that we might be able to change that and make things more consistent with our future land use map. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else for public comment? Hearing none, move on. At this point, I'd like to pay some recognition to our veterans and their service they've done for our nation and our country and even the folks of Mills River. We, had Sue do a proclamation recognizing Veterans Day. Do we have any veterans with us tonight? Would you please stand up for us, please? Sue, do you have a copy of this that one of y'all could read for us in recognition of it?
Yes, I do. All right. Whereas the greatest acknowledgement of our freedom is to honor our armed forces, veterans who have sacrificed and in many instances paid the ultimate price for our freedom. And whereas in 1975, the United States Congress voted to make November 11th Veterans Day in honor of our veterans, living and dead, who served in the armed forces. And whereas the Town Council of Mills River would like to acknowledge and recognize the current and former Mills River residents, board members, and employees who have selflessly served in the armed forces and all armed services veterans. Whereas Mills River will always remember and pay homage to our military community, both active and inactive, for their contribution, dedication, and commitment to the cause of our freedom. Now, therefore, be it resolved that in observance of Veterans Day, Saturday, November 11, 2023, the town of Mills River proudly joins the rest of the nation to salute and give special honor and recognition to the men and women who served us in our armed forces. Witness my hand and seal, 9th day of November, 2023, Shannegon's Mayor.
If y'all would be so kind as to step up, I'll come around, and if y'all would like one of these framed plaques, I'd be willing to give it. Or if you're not interested, we'll save them for anybody that might come in the next month or two to receive one. We had a handful done. We should have enough if you don't be bashful.
Recognition's hard, but I do appreciate what you.
Dad?
I'll just mention for the folks listening at home that Brian Ross from our town planning board.
You get up.
Oh, it's going well.
Jim Foster from the town's planning board. And then our very own.
Mr. Park.
Right.
Thanks, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you for your service, gentlemen. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thad is one of our employees who works part-time in our parks department.
Thank you.
All of us win.
If anyone knows of anybody that would like one of these, we'd be honored to see that they get one.
This is David Hill, who is a consultant, but also a veteran. We thank him for his service.
Appreciate you. All right, moving on to our consent agenda. Anybody have any questions or anything about it? I take a motion to approve it.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second,
I'll second the motion.
yeah, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Moving on to our regular agenda. Carl Shaw, you're up.
Good evening. I have the opportunity to present a draft of the audit report for the year ended June 30, 2023. As you know, in North Carolina, our state statutes require an annual audit, and those statements have grown now, I think, to 66 pages this year. It's interesting how governmental accounting and reporting has expanded, especially over the last few years with the COVID and the ARPA funds that have come along your way and to other municipal governments here and throughout the United States and here in North Carolina. You have hired Mr. Brian Broom to do a final review of the trial balance that was presented to us by Sue and Patty and the rest of the team. He evaluates how the financial statements are presented, and he is in the process of doing that. And I would imagine we will hear from him in about a week. He's known as a very particular man, and he likes everything so-so, just perfect. So there may be a few changes here, but the gist of it is that you have a clean audit report. I'm able to issue an opinion that these statements are fairly presented as of June 30, 2023, along with the results of the year that have transpired ending on June 30. I thought what we could do is just spend a couple of minutes looking through some of the pages. What I would like you to do is look at the number at the bottom of the page in your draft and go to page number 5. This statement reflects what go past the Roman numeral pages. On the balance sheets, it shows where you were as of June 30. It reflects your cash position. It reflects what was due to you from other governments. That's mainly sales tax revenue. And that totaled almost $400,000. You've earned the revenue, but it gets to you after, by September, you get it all. That pertains back to June. You'll also notice that there is some accounts payable, but very little. And the rest of it, called fund balance, is what your overall reserves consist of. And it's broken down into various different components. The largest this year is what we have set aside for the purchase of the land that took place subsequent to year end, but you had made the deal prior to the end of the fiscal year. Now look at page number 9. And we're going to look specifically at the general fund. That is the major fund that you operate here. And it reflects not only the original budget, but the amended budget and then the actual numbers for the year. Since COVID, and I remember the dire news out of the League of Municipalities that sales tax was just going to evaporate and you're going to be down 30 or 40%. That never happened. And you budgeted $1.5 million in unrestricted intergovernmental money, and that's where the sales tax is. And yet you almost came in with $2 million for the course of 2023. And another thing that really benefited your bottom line this year is investment earnings. If we go back over the last 5 years, interest rates were to infinitesimally small. And finally this year, especially with the Capital Management Trust, they're paying 5%, a good chunk of the year. And you can see investment earnings significantly higher than what we have seen over the last 5 years. The budget that you approve each year is broken down into major categories. The general government, that's a big one. Public safety is the funds you send to the fire department and for the police protection that you're provided. the park is included under the economic and the cultural and recreational. But your overall budget for the year was $5.5 million, and you spent just under $5 million. If you go down to the line that says net change in fund balance, you'll see the overall increase in fund balance that occurred this year. That's $1.6 million. One of the things that came about after COVID was the issuance of ARPA money to all the municipal governments in the United States. And you as a town have selected to use the revenue replacement method of using that money. If you look just above where it said net change in fund balance, you'll see a line that says transfers from other funds. And it's $989,000. That represents the ARPA money that was expended during the year June 30, 23. Now, there's a deal that we have with the federal government that we'll be spending this by, what is it, Sue, 2026? We're not going to have to wait that long. I think we'll have it done within either next year or the year following. What I like about the overall fund balance of the town is that you have an opportunity to make purchases as you did without having to significantly take on new debt. And that's a really, that's a blessing of being able to utilize fund balance to help you make capital purchases online. Now, let's go back to page number 41 and 42. If we look at page 42 first, I like the fact that historically Mills River has collected a very high percentage of the property taxes that are levied each year. And the overall percentage this year, including the motor vehicle taxes that we also receive, is 99.37%. I don't think you can do much better than that. Generating that kind of cash, Arlie, you're doing something right. A lot of things. Indeed. It is that it's something good to say about the residents and the businesses of Mills River, that you see the value of what's being provided and you pay your share. And if you look at page 41, our levy this year was just under $3.2 million. And at the end of the year, we are owed $20,000. And then if you look down the list, you will find 10 years worth of unpaid property taxes, all which we have to remain on our books under state statute. The whole total for 10 years is $55,000. I'd say that's an indicator that taxes have been received at a very high level. And so keep up the work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're working on those backpacks.
We also are required to issue an audit opinion on how you use the money for revenue replacement. There's a set of standards that was set up by the government that I get to follow. And I can say that you have met all those requirements. And I'm issuing an opinion here in the back of the financial statements where you will find in the final version, you will find my clean opinion on that reporting. So I commend you for a really good audit. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Sue and Patty and everybody for providing the information that we needed. I am privileged to say I've enjoyed working with you. And thank you very much for the opportunity of sharing this audit with you tonight.
Thank you. Any questions for Carl while he's up? Staff got any questions? Thank you, sir. Appreciate your hard work.
You're welcome.
Straight. Thank you. Okay, so now we're up to the land preservation program. Portion 20.3, that's not.
So, good evening, Mayor and Council. And before you tonight, you got a packet emailed to you yesterday and a paper copy delivered to you this evening of the Town of Mills River Land Preservation Program. And this is something that we have been working on for really since May in earnest. We established the Land Preservation Committee to develop a program that the town could use to help preserve land. Now, you notice I keep saying land. Initially, it was farmland only. The committee discussed that over several meetings and decided that we have the greatest possibility to preserve land if we go beyond just farmland and look at land in general. So maybe there's environmentally sensitive areas, maybe there's floodplains, maybe there's steep slopes that the town is interested in preserving. So it's a land preservation program. With us tonight, we have several members of that committee. First of all, Mayor Pro Tem Randy Austin was our chair. James Cantrell was on the board as well. John Kay is on the other side of the room. Mr. Bradley Johnston, Brian Ross from our planning board, and then Lisa Marina also from our planning board serve on that committee. In addition to Mr. Foster, I couldn't say sorry about that. So it was a good group of people. We worked together for several months. We spoke with Conserving Carolina on several occasions to talk about what they do. And it is the intention of this program and the intention of the committee that once this becomes policy of the town, that the town will be basically a financing gap partner. So there's several expenses that go along with establishing a conservation easement or transferring of land for conservation or preservation purposes. Attorney's fees, appraisals fees, things like that a lot of funding agencies typically don't cover. So it is the hope that this program would be available for property owners to come to the town and make a request, and then we would ultimately put them in contact with someone like Conserving Carolina, who then would take them through the process and search for state and federal funding to help compensate them for those loss of development rights and in a financial way. So that's what I have as far as an overview. Randy, do you want to speak to anything in addition to that?
So, no, I think you covered it pretty well. Like I said, the whole committee is here except Herbie Johnson. I think he's got some sickness in his family. And we all came to the conclusion or the consensus that this was the best plan we could come up with this time. And it's not something that, of course, like anything that the town puts in place, is nothing that's written in stone. It can change and grow or shrink over time as matches come and go, or however we see that it's working for the town. So I guess, Daniel, what would be the best way to, would it be just open up questions from council that hasn't been involved?
I think
with this
so.
program.
I think it might also, if you want to call on any of your committee members and see if they have anything to add.
Yeah, I was going to wait till
Okay.
that.
All right.
After we got through all the questions. So, I know y'all got this in email form, in hard copy now. So we're open to any questions that you might have. And I know you'll have some.
So, I mean, Don don't have a problem with it, by no means. At what point did y'all decide to make it land preservation instead of farmland preservation? There had to be something stimulated that, something brought y'all's attention that.
So, do you want me to speak?
Go for it. Yeah.
So, I guess it was probably in about our third or fourth meeting, the committee, we were looking at just focusing on farmland to start with, but the consensus of the committee was to open it up for all lands in Mills River, because there was an idea that, and rightly so, that we were going to get overrun, and it's not just farmland; it's going to be in danger of being developed. So the scoring system that we came up with, I think, leans heavily toward the conserving of farmland more than just woodland, swampland, anything like that. So if you want to look that over, if you already have. Can you speak to any more of that, Daniel, if it's not covered, or?
That is the gist of it. The idea being to open the door to as much preservation as we could do. And I'll pull up the scoring rubric in just a moment, and you can see what Randy was explaining about favoring land that is currently in agricultural production in some form or fashion. I will say that we talked about greenhouses, whether or not they would qualify for this. The committee's decision was not to include greenhouses. If there's a property that has a greenhouse on it, but wants to be part of this program, they would need to subdivide that part off with the building, and then the rest of it could be preserved.
And the reasoning for that was we felt like if taking town money, public money, and if we help conserve a piece of property that's vacant currently, and somebody buys in it, if we included the greenhouses, that people would see this and see greenhouses being built on it, and this would be a one-time program, because I think the Upward community would be such that we wouldn't get a second chance. So that was the reasoning for carving that out. Okay. And we all realize that greenhouse production is agriculture, but that was the sole reason for carving that out. Was that right, Daniel?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Then the other thing that we focused heavily on was development pressure. So if a property is on a major road and it has access to utilities, the chances of that being purchased for a subdivision or a commercial project was much greater than one that's off of a side road with no utilities and things like that. So if you look at the scoring system, you can see that properties that are currently in ag production.
Daniel, their screen here is not working.
Oh,
Uh,
all right. I'll let Mike work on that. He's the expert.
okay. They've got it here on the back.
Yeah, it's on the back of your
Okay.
packet. But ag production scores the highest. With previously farmed land would score second highest, and then floodplain. We went back and forth on floodplain for a couple of meetings about whether or not we should focus on that. And the idea was it is sensitive land, and it is land that could be purchased and developed, but it's not as high of a risk as land that is currently being farmed, because there are already some built-in risks with developing on that kind of land. And then the next one is the development pressure. You can see initially we started off with all of the roads that were on the architectural design standard list, which was quite extensive. But in an effort to make this as streamlined and condensed as possible, we went with just the major roads in town that carry a lot of vehicles, but also roads that when you are on them, you see a lot of farmland or open space. Because again, that is a big part of what this effort is to preserve land in general. The utility access component of it, we put a lot of weight on access to public utilities. So if you look on this line right here, adjacent to public wastewater, that is the key to density. If you can get wastewater service, public wastewater service to a property, then you are able to develop that at a much higher rate than if you were not able to secure wastewater services. So if you're immediately adjacent to it, you would get the most amount of points. If you're within a quarter mile, the second amount, and then so on and so forth. Water is important, but it's not as important as wastewater in terms of density for future development. And then as far as the acreage goes, we were prioritizing larger lots. The larger your parcel, the more points you get in this program.
Other questions?
Oh, greenhouses are ineligible. Is other horticulture eligible? A tree farm?
Yeah, we're
Lines.
not making a distinction other than greenhouses. So horticulture and any kind of.
And it says the properties, for eligibility, the properties must be clear of any violations of local, state, federal laws. Does it just go without saying there can't be any liens on it, or does that need to be on the policy?
That came up. A lot of stuff came up, so
Yeah.
I'll let Damon talk about that.
I was hoping you were going to answer that one. We did actually have that listed in one of the category, one of the items of ineligibility is that it had to be free of any liens. And I think we decided to remove that. I'm going to lean on the whole committee here because certain properties, it was assumed would have mortgages on them, and that wouldn't necessarily exclude them from these efforts. But it would obviously be taken into consideration, and that's my vague recollection. We good on that?
Would the mortgage holder have a stake in that?
That came up too.
Yeah.
I mean, I could see where if something,
So
mortgage way out there, if they potentially lost it after, then their deed restrictions would be
The
severely.
landholder would have to agree to it.
Okay, gotcha. Perfect.
So we had Tom Faslaw. Did I say that right?
Mm-hmm.
He's with Concerned Carolina. He's the farm preservation guy for Concerned Carolina. And he answered a lot of questions that we had along those lines. And he did not have a problem with the way we worded it. Right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
There was an option to possibly carve out a residence and people lean against that. In fact, the equity was there. Free up the other 8 acres, 10 acres.
But a lot of this, and we found that out since we've been talking about this and talking to people that do this, is going to be facilitated by the land trust, the Concerned Carolinas. And the town, help me if I'm wrong, Danny, town is just putting these rules in place for funding that would come from the town. So if there was a property in the town of Mills River and it met what these guidelines were, then the town would be able to facilitate some funding for that.
The town can be stricter than these land trusts, but not less strict. That makes sense.
The rules
Okay.
that they have in place, yeah.
I probably have a question that y'all may not have covered that I've been thinking about the last week or two, but just like Mr. Ross got up earlier and said, he's in favor of this, he is a citizen of Mills River and all this. Would it even be possible to, if we had enough community support, let's say, to have a bond referendum to maybe set aside an extra penny or 2 cents to put toward this program moving forward?
You could do a bond program if you were looking at it through the lens of parks and recreation. So if you had properties identified that you wanted to conserve, and the plan was to turn them into a park. And I don't mean necessarily like a park, like a playground and baseball fields, but a passive park with trails and things. You can't issue bonds for the purchase of.
Okay.
But if you tie it with parks and recreation, then that is a possibility.
Now, it's my understanding that the counties can do this, correct? Because Buncombe County has their own program. They don't have to partner with a land trust. They run their own program. And they did the bond thing last year, James?
Yeah, 2 years ago. Or well, last
$30
time.
million. So, but that's Buncombe County. So towns, I don't think, are they able to do that?
No, that's right.
That's why we can just partner with, or be a financial partner with a land trust. We can't be on the deed.
Yeah, and nor do we
said that
want to
right,
be.
right?
And that was the whole purpose of this, is that the town would be a partner in a process, but the Land Conservancy, whether it be Conserving Carolina, and we just use that name because we all know it, but we're not exclusive to them by any means, but that we would be a partner in this process, not the deed holder or anything like that.
I know you've been in on a couple of conversations I've had with some of the commissioners about trying to bring this together, get the county on board, get their end of it rolling. or maybe we could even partner with them on some stuff, along with the privates, I guess you call it private, being Conserving Carolina.
Right.
I've also talked to Tim Moffett and them about possibly getting some state money to help us along, to, because $500,000 sounds like a lot of money, but if we had several projects going,
Mm-hmm.
it was gonna help with surveying and stuff, it'll dwindle away pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
So,
We did have a gentleman in the state.
So we had two fellas in from the state. One was from Raleigh and the other one from Haywood County, maybe. And so the town putting money into this is going to be small fry. The big money comes from the feds and the state programs. And this will, it's my opinion and Conservative Carolina's opinion also, is if the town has skin in the game with some funding, that will move you up the list to receive some other funding from states or federal.
great. What else showed up?
I've got a question. If you're looking at wetlands or floodplains and we are in the zoning that we already have for development, what kind of development are you looking, if they say want to put wetlands in, what kind of development rights are you buying or purchasing?
The way that it would work is if you own property that has wetlands or floodplain on it,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't want to do anything, it flooding, or you don't want to go through the process of moving those wetlands and having to get permits and all that kind of stuff. But let's say that's only on a portion of your property. Well, you could subdivide that piece out, and you can't sell it because it's got wetlands. You might try to work with the Conservancy to get some cash from that, selling the rights to develop it. That is what a conservation easement is you're selling certain rights for that property. So you would work with a conservancy, and there would be an appraisal done, current appraisal, and then post easement appraisal, which we learned those are quite specialized and therefore pretty expensive. But you're not looking to develop it per se. You're selling the rights to develop it in the future.
So in buying the rights to develop it, you're going to assume that you were going to spend the money to develop it, and that would be what you paid for it?
No, there would be a pre-easement appraisal done. So what's it worth in today's dollars for highest and best use? And
Okay.
that is a dollar figure. And then there would be an appraisal done that says, if this is conserved, this is how much it'd be worth in the future. And please correct me if I'm wrong here, but that difference is what you would be selling, so to
Okay.
speak.
So it's not going to be like if you had five acres of wetland and you were saying, okay, well, if I was going to build houses on it, then that's not the value.
Yes, and
Yeah, it's kind of a mix.
it would be the value, if I understand it right, of the improved land, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
to get it to build ready, maybe.
Yeah, so the appraisal would look at it just like any other appraisal would. And if you own property that is just wetlands, it's not going to appraise very high because it would take a lot of work to make that useful,
Right.
as opposed to property that's on the highway with water and sewer. So there's appraisal, a current market value that you look at, and then the appraisal will examine it very closely, one of these easement appraisal folks, and say, it's wetlands now, it's a good candidate for conservation, but you also have to be realistic and say, in an appraisal, you're probably not going to put a bunch of houses on there because it's already wetlands. So that there's not a lot of room there because of that particular example. But if you had a property that was on a major corridor, had access to water and sewer, and was zoned for commercial development, its existing market value is going to be very high. And the post easement value, whatever those different numbers are, that's the value of the easement that the Conservancy would go out and try to find dollars to match to compensate the landowner for not developing that in the future.
It's
Okay.
basically almost two appraisals. So
Mhm.
it'll be one appraisal, what it's worth without the development rights gone. and then what it would be worth just as land from now on, because you would sell the development rights. Does that make any sense?
It helps clear it up a little bit.
Because they were very specific with this, South Carolina was, about they only work with how many appraisers?
Like 5 or 8
5 or
maybe.
6 appraisers, and they are very picky about who can do their appraisals for them. So, to get that difference, that's the number of pre-development rights and after the development personal.
What else we got? Other questions?
Well, I was going to pick up on what the mayor talked about. If Mills River had a dedicated revenue stream, as identified tax revenue that goes straight into this trust fund, is there any scenario by which we could actually be purchasing the development rights, not just be a partner paying for accessory or services? Could we have a Buncombe County type land preservation in the town, or is that?
Not likely. The statutes are fairly clear that counties can purchase land for the purpose of preservation and conservation. It doesn't say cities can't do it, but in North Carolina, the statutes have to actually say you're allowed to do it, not that just because it says you can't, doesn't mean you can.
The only thing it says is counties are able to do it, but it doesn't say municipality. So there are not very many towns that would have land available to do this with. Mill River is kind of unique. But-
Then go ahead.
Go ahead.
What we could do similar to that is, again, going back to recreation, if you set it up under, with the intention of purchasing land for preservation, but opening it up to the public, you could do that. You'd have to put in parking and probably some unimproved trails, which would just be, they would be improved, but they wouldn't be concrete or asphalt trails. And that also opens up other funding sources through like Clean Water Trust and things like that. You couldn't do it exclusively for farmland preservation, no.
So we kicked it around a lot, talking about that. And the idea was that the town would never be able to foot the bill to go and do the inspections, do all the paperwork that a third-party land trust would be that they do day in and day out. And we keep using Conservative Carolina. They've been very helpful through this process, but there's lots of different land trusts out there. There's some that just do farmland. You know what I mean? So we keep saying Conservative Carolina, but and my hope is one of these days that the county will have a program like Buncombe County, and we can just partner with the county to hold the development rights and sort of easements.
Because it's my understanding that these properties would get inspected annually. Yearly.
Okay, and once you purchase the development rights on land, it goes with the deed forever?
I'll offer up just another way of approaching this is that there was a program that ran several cycles in eastern North Carolina. It was basically buying out hog farms, and there was parallels in that they're buying your right to raise confined animals on property. They're trying to get hog lagoons and hogs out of the floodplain. But the reason I bring that up, it works very much like farmland preservation in the sense that you're just buying certain rights to land. But a lot of those deeds are held in the eastern part of North Carolina, the Soil and Water Conservation District, which is actually a political entity which follows, for most of them, the county lines. But obviously, Soil and Water Conservation Districts at this end of the state aren't doing that because there's not been a reason for them to take that on. But that's another entity that you could pursue is the Henderson County Soil and Water Conservation District. Or we could pursue about any interest in, they have a vested interest in seeing agriculture perpetuate in Henderson County and also Mills River. So, but they have a lot of lot of the same, trying to figure out how to state it, but they are a political entity and they aren't bound by some of the things that restrict the town or a city, but they do have a lot of authority. They can even levy a tax and things like that. They just don't.
I don't think the committee is definitely opposed to something like that. I don't, that didn't come up, but the reasoning behind that we would have to partner with a third party was because of cost to the town, staff time, and just that we don't really know what we're doing about that.
Right, and I agree wholeheartedly. We don't need to get in holding easements and doing that, but there are, like I said, other partners that aren't a land conservancy that can do it and are doing it in other places in North Carolina.
That is a very common model across the state.
So, where do we need to go from here? Get the ball rolling.
Well, this is the first time you're seeing it, so if you want to take time to think about it, you can certainly do that. You don't have to take action tonight, but if you are comfortable with it, there is a resolution in your packet which would establish this program as policy of the town.
I have no problem if y'all want to look at it and talk about it some more. We tried to keep it simple
Mm-hmm.
as we could for reasons for somebody that might come in and want to start the conversation. We wanted it to be pretty simple. But do know that we spent a lot of time talking and kicking it around and going down rabbit holes. But and we had a lot of input from people that do this every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really want to emphasize how much Conserving Carolina they were very helpful in this process. They do this stuff every day, and we're very, very
And
helpful.
we even had a guy from the state, like I said, he came up for a meeting from Raleigh. So, yeah, it was pretty nice.
Whatever this board's pleasure, I think with us being, three of us seeing it for the first time and a lot of people watching on YouTube now, we probably ought to at least give it till the next council meeting to possibly make a decision. So see if we get any more public
Yeah.
input on it.
While they're
I would
on
agree.
here, I'd like, if it's okay with the mayor,
Absolutely.
offer up anybody that wants to say anything to the community. If you don't got anything to say, jump on up here.
Happy. Always appreciate you guys letting us talk, every one of you. I think it's fantastic. About the floodplain, a lot of people don't realize in the 500-year flood, no flood insurance is required. You can develop in that just like any other permit we pull to build. If you're watching the county level at all, there's some contentious conversations going on about filling that flood. And I know we kind of separate ourselves from the county, but they're running out of space and they're trying to make more space. Specifically about this, Randy has said this a couple times. Really, if you don't mind, I'm just going to jump on that, Randy, that there's a lot of new words here. A lot of us didn't know. There's a huge process here that can be a little bit overwhelming. We really, really want this to be a success, and bringing in Conserving Carolina really just kind of let us breathe. I don't want people to be intimidated to come in here. You're not going to have us stumbling over ourselves. We're going to put you in touch with someone that does this every day. When you're talking to these people, it is impressive. I was so happy to have them in here. I think anyone who sat in on that would agree that they took all of our energy and our desires and they focused us. And this really got simplified. I want, just like Randy has said, I want it to be a success. I would like to see, I'd like to see it funded annually. I know there's not a sunset on the most recent tax hike paying for the land. There's opportunities there. I don't know how the fine print works, but I hope it's something that stays. I hope it's not just a one time. And I hope these first few properties we get, and to close with that, these first few properties, if you're listening right now, tell us those properties. Don't wait for us to come. We can put you in touch with the right people if you have some high pressure. You guys know I live on Schoolhouse. Schoolhouse has sewer right in front of you, water. It's already cleared. It's level. It's not flood, and they're 30+ acre tracts multiple. We have high desirability here. I'd love to see some people step up and volunteer some names and just know that it's going to be a lot easier than it sounds tonight. Randy, really, again, appreciate everything. Thanks.
Thank you, Ryan.
Would it be a fair statement to say that the average person, individual, landowner, probably doesn't understand even the whole mechanism of this? Would it be fair to say that? And they probably, even watching tonight, wouldn't know what we're even talking about?
I think it's probably more than fair to say that. We've been
So-
talking about it every 2 weeks for 6 months, and it's a lot to digest. It
So
is.
how do we, I want this to work, so how do we engage these potential prospects? Is there a way? Do we need to be more on the aggressive side and try to make a field visit or make a phone call or something to get them to at least have a conversation about this?
So I think we originally were aggressive and then we really backed it off to try and get a shotgun approach of multiple people bringing stuff in versus, but I mean, I'm all for it.
Well, that's, I guess, a good question. Do we feel like as soon as we put this resolution in effect, we're gonna have multiples come forward? Do we know that, or?
I don't know that we know. That's a big unknown. I can't answer that question. I think everybody can, but, you know, I think the way we looked at it was, you know, anybody that's got farmland in this community, they know each other. We had the Cantrell family represented by James here, Bradley Johnson, we had Kirby Johnson on this committee. So everybody knows Bradley, James, and Kirby that have property that they might want to conserve. So it's going to be a lot of personal relationships starting out, I think. I mean, it really is. And I think it's very important, and I've said this before, that if we get the first one and it's done right, and people can look and talk to that person that has entered into this program, that the second one and third one's gonna be a lot easier.
Well, I'm gonna throw this out there, because I'm sure, you know, others have thought about it. For the ones watching, or the ones that's gonna ask questions later, is there a field gap of money when somebody's looking at, okay, let's just say that land's worth $100,000 developable. Even if I keep it, they can still rent it out or lease it out for ag, correct, or whatever. But is there a field gap of money there to make it look interesting for them?
So
That'd be a question I would have, and probably needs to get out there.
if I can speak for just a second here, and Daniel, correct me if I'm wrong, but it used to be, and Bradley is sitting here and here, he'll know if I'm telling you right. So it used to be that if the state got involved in funding, that they would do 50%. Is that right, Daniel?
I believe that is correct.
They could do 50% of the development, right, between the two numbers, pre and after. And then if you went after federal money, the state would cut it back to, they would only fund 25% if you got any of the federal money. But they have changed that, correct, Daniel? That the state is no longer cutting theirs back to 50%. You can, if everything goes right, you can technically get 50% from the feds and 50% of that value from the state also. And did I say that right, Brad?
Sir,
Okay.
it was 75.
It was 75 before. So theoretically, you could still make somebody whole and then keep their property and keep it in farm.
They still sell it, Randy. They still retain the rights.
Oh, yeah, they still retain the rights to sell it, but
It would just
will-
remain
it will-
with the deed restriction as
Exactly.
applied.
And one thing that we talked a lot about, and this is hard to put on paper in black and white, but each project will be different. And so you might have a property that's 30 acres and they want to subdivide off a piece for a house. That's great. And then they negotiate what they want to be able to do with the other 29 or 25 acres or whatever. And that can be, it can only be used for certain crops. It can only be used, they don't want to have a nursery on it or something like that. So that those easements are going to be as different as there are properties in the program. And each one is negotiated differently.
Well, I think it sounds real interesting, and just receiving this tonight, I'd like some time to think about it and talk to different people involved with it, and find out more.
So, at the board's pleasure, do we have a?
So can any of the rest of
Yeah.
us speak if they want to?
Yeah.
Mr. Keyes, Bradley, anybody else that, if you want to come up and say anything, now's your time. Okay, let's.
I just want to say that I really appreciated the opportunity to be a part of these conversations over the last 6 months. And I think what was really valuable, or one of the really valuable things for me personally, is being one of the newer members of this community and newer members of this town, and being a part of the conversation with persons that have been here for much longer than me, who know the land, who have farmed the land, and seeing that all of us have the same value and desire to keep Mills River what it is to all of us today. And so I just wanted to really thank the town for, making this initiative happen and for creating this committee and setting aside these funds for this, and let you know, as like the member of the public who sat on that committee, I just can't say that enough about how I think that this really aligns with, the values of people that are coming here now. So your newer residents that have moved in the last 5 years or so, we see what came before us, and we are part of the effort to continue what is here and to preserve our heritage and preserve our farmland. And so I wanted to let you know that this does come, I think it came from all of our hearts, and we really do see the value in doing this program, and hope to see it move forward, and look forward to our members of the public coming and taking advantage of it down the road here. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Randy, did you have enough discussions in all your meetings to know what's the typical funding cycle for these other programs, federal or state, to know where our application cycle should fall, so that if we identify somebody that we'd like to push forward and marry up with a sponsor, that they can start hitting the milepost to get these funds?
There's something that we did find out, and this was a little bit on the surprising to me, but I think they said it was about a 2-year project, isn't that right, Andy? To go from first talking about it to closing out the deal. So it's not a fast or an easy project or process. But Daniel, I'll let you speak to when the town was wanting to take applications. I think James made a good point at our last meeting about when we could start taking applications.
So one thing, just to expound on Randy's answer about the cycle, I don't know off the top of my head what those deadlines are for the state and federal programs. But if I remember correctly, those are once a year. And I think it's typically in the fall. Our intention was that I think in practical terms, our program, we want to time it up to the town's budget, because we'll have to budget for funding for whatever projects that we have. So eventually, applications would be due sometime probably in the early part of the calendar year, so that they could be incorporated into the budget. And I know we had that conversation on Tuesday about our initial application process, but I can't remember off the top of my head. So James, do you happen to recall what you said?
I don't know. It was good, but I don't remember what I said.
I think we were talking about maybe a 3-month cycle. This first time around.
Yeah.
Is that what y'all remember?
Mm-hmm.
Like from January 1st through the end of March. This first time around, and then maybe accept applications after that, along those same lines in time to start the budget process for the next year, which will be in the next year.
I mean, I hope this program is adopted, and if so, I'm anxious to open the application period just to see if anybody makes an inquiry. It's probably the most misunderstood thing about land preservation, as we've talked about, is that a farmer with 100 acres on the highway with water and sewer and gas cannot apply for that money. They have to have a sponsor. They have to go through, Land Conservancy or otherwise. So that's probably the first thing a landowner needs to know. And I think if we can get them in the door and educate them on how it works and how the town fits in this big process, we'll see who's still interested afterwards. But that's why I was just curious, if this is adopted before the end of the calendar year, how soon can we start seeing a potential applicant come through the door of town hall saying, I'm interested in this, guide me on where I need to go.
We've got a lot of information, a lot of paperwork from Southern Carolina again, and I was a little bit overwhelmed by it. And I asked about, somebody comes in the door, put a hand down of something that's going to confuse them and make it seem like it's not going to happen. No way you can jump through all these hoops. But Mr. Passlaw said that he doesn't take paper with him the first time he talks to anybody. So he just goes and starts the conversation. And it is overwhelming. I think we all found that out.
Mhm.
It's a lot to take in. It is. But these people that do this day in and day out for a living are experts. They really are. And so it's not going to be this dumb guy sitting up here trying to put all this stuff on paper. It's going to be a professional.
Okay. I've got one other question that's come to my head. So when these deed restrictions are put on property,
Mm-hmm.
does the county reassess it based on those restrictions and reestablish their values?
I'm gonna,
That's very nice, but do you have any insight on that? I would assume so.
I would assume they do, but I do not definitively know. But I can certainly find out for you.
I was going to ask a question along that line. If once they do this and go into the land preservation, are they then tax deferred?
so interestingly, we haven't even opened the door about the tax conversation.
Okay.
That is a very, very complicated conversation that Mr. Fanslow from Conserving Carolina went into in excruciating detail. But he knows it inside and out. And so there's income tax benefits to property owners who do this. I'm going to stop there because there's a lot of benefits that can be realized.
There's a lot of benefits to the landowner. But Mr. Shaw has left the room that they need to consult with a tax person about.
So what do you want to move this to what all that we got on our December meeting so far? Is it packed up pretty good? Because we'll probably only do one meeting because of Christmas break. So
That's right.
Your agenda for the 14th depends somewhat on what happens the rest of this evening
With the annexations.
with the annexations.
Just based on the
This is
conversation.
our only meeting this month, isn't it? Okay.
Next one's on Thanksgiving.
I don't want to push y'all because I know you're just now getting this in your hand. I'll let y'all decide that. 'Cause I know
Well,
when I'm ready.
I'll go home and go through it, and then I'll call Randy and talk to him, and call different people that were on there and talk to them.
maybe we'll just potentially put it on. We won't put it on tonight. So we'll see if we turn out.
I'd like to table it to the next meeting or
Go next week. What are you gonna do with it?
whatever you want.
Next week? Okay.
That's fine.
Put it on there.
Yep. Sounds good.
Right.
I would like to say a word of thank you to these people. They took out a lot of the time, and I appreciate y'all. I really do.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Randy. I thought you did a good job heading that committee up.
Thank you, Brad. Hey, y'all are free to go if you want to, or you're welcome to stay. Appreciate it.
So when staff gets caught up, we'll be on our, what was originally our fee petition for annexation. 0 Radio Road.
So on October 25th, we received two petitions for annexation. The parcels are adjacent, but they are not both contiguous to the town boundary. So we've separated them, and the first one we're looking at, it has no property address because it is bare land, and it's owned by Lots Properties. It's the one that's a little over 6 acres, or right around 6 acres. And then, if it is council's decision to go forward, then we would look at the other one as well, because when you got to the public hearing stage, you would handle one and then the other, because once you adopted one, then the other one becomes contiguous. So we're just doing it in stages. There are a lot of steps to go through, but the first one is to answer any of your questions about it. Not sure what you would be thinking about. Like I said, it's about 6 acres. It is on Ray Hill Road, and there is a plat with your petition.
Right back up on the GIS. I know you like to okay, I'm sorry.
And that's the 1.75 acres?
The other.
The other one, okay.
Look at it.
It was the first one in your packet. Yeah, I think the front page of the petition actually came in at 5.71 acres, but the recorded plat shows it closer to 6.
So do you have to do the 5.711 first because it touches the town? And then
Yes.
that would allow the second one?
Mm-hmm.
And if you do one, you have to do the other?
No, you consider each one separately. But if you
Okay.
chose to not do the one that's about 6 acres, and you wanted to do the other one, then we have to start the process over because now we have a satellite annexation.
Okay.
So as a mayor, I would, before we even start this, I would ask, does anybody on this board have a conflict of interest with this? Anybody relative to this or any interest in it?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Okay.
I'm good on that.
No. You're fine. Just kidding. I'm just making sure. So we ought to cover all bases. So, Sue, Daniel, as we go through this, are we binded by law? Can we ask any and all questions, or is there certain things we can't ask?
No, you can ask. We hope to have the answers.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Mr. Lotz couldn't be here.
Can I start out with the first off-the-wall question of, can you provide any insight why the planning board tabled this?
I was not at the meeting. I don't know if maybe Mike can help with that.
So part of the annexation process is just the assignment of Mills River zoning, and state law allows those processes to occur at the same time. But the zoning assignment, through a public hearing with council would have to wait till after the annexations are finalized. So we were looking at assigning mixed use zoning because everything out there is mixed use. But when the planning board looked at the future land use map, Basically all areas in town that are zoned mixed use currently are designated rural residential in the future land use map. And if you remember that map, those separate districts have a table with desirable land uses, acceptable land uses, and then not desirable land uses. So for rural residential, which again, because this is in county jurisdiction, it does not have a designation in our future land use map, but everything around it is rural residential. I believe the acceptable land uses are, large estate lot, single family home development, civic and community parks, low intensity uses. The not desirable uses included, I think, industrial, commercial, and multifamily. So based on our comprehensive plan, that is something that, the public, and when that plan was adopted, we don't ideally want to have in this area. The planning board had some trepidation, and there's some members here tonight that could speak to it too, because mixed use allows almost all uses. So there was some concern, even though everything else in these areas of town are zoned mixed use and allow almost all commercial and residential uses, there was some concern about that conflict with the land use map.
James, can I say something from the planning board? Okay. Sorry. From the planning board, just to clarify, annexation was not put to us. That was not part of our decision in any way. We were told it was 100% on the council, correct? So only the zoning was on us. Earlier tonight, you heard me say I'd like to visit this mixed use, but today, based on today's rules, I made the motion that we apply mixed use. So I can't speak to why it was tabled, because I didn't want to see it tabled. I wanted to see it signed mixed use. But I just want to clarify, annexation was not put to the vote.
Okay.
I think I was probably the one that brought it up about the conflict there on the planning board. And I still have great concern if we bring this in as mixed use, of all the things as Mark pointed out that could happen. And I did point that out last night to Mr. Lotz. He said what he wants to do with it now. I think it basically build some houses. But say something happened to him and we already rezoned it to mixed use, and you got a nice little tract here, over 6 acres. It could turn into a lot of things. So that was my opposition to it, and we did take a vote on that, which was, we voted 4-3, I believe it was, to not do it. And then we came back later and decided, well, let's table it, because we're kind of getting the cart before the horse here, was my thoughts. And I think if it's going to happen, it ought to be zoned anything, it ought to be MR30. I know that most of the homes around this particular property is residential. It's in the county now, it's not in the city. But to me, if it's going to be rezoned to anything, if you're going to annex it, like he said, we were not concerned with that. But if it's going to be rezoned to anything, it ought to come in as MR30. That's where we would have.
So it's my understanding that we got some issues to go through other than that, but if we took it in as a voluntary annexation, we've got 60 days after that to classify the zoning of it. Is that correct?
Yeah, so state statute states county development regulations remain in effect until basically the town applies something, or 60 days following the annexation. So even though hypothetically, if it was annexed and the town, let's say, took 90 days to assign zoning, in theory, our development regulations, even though there may be no zoning district assigned, would still be applicable after that 60-day window, which again is why staff just wanted to start the process as early as possible, so we have time for these types of discussions.
And in like with, what we had to do with Fletcher Fire Department. On the other one, we'll be in a similar situation with Etowah, correct?
It is a little different. Fletcher was not considered a rural fire department. And Etowah Horseshoe is because it's in an unincorporated area. So, they will get their taxes for this year. And then going forward, it would be Mills River Fire taxes. But, and I'll remind you that Chief Huggins is here and wants to speak, from Etowah Horseshoe Fire. I've sent him the forms. We have to get information on their debt. And I've already done a calculation on the amount of acreage we would be annexing versus their entire fire district, which is 0.032%. And based on their annual payments of debt, we apply that percentage. If it's over $100, then we owe them that amount for 5 years. But we also have to have an agreement approved by the local government commission. So we'd have to have a signed agreement. If it's under $100, then we don't pay them. It's basically reimbursement. The theory is that these lots would help pay for the debt, and they had planned ahead having them.
So with these agreements that have to be approved by the local government commission, have to be okayed by them prior to us annexing the property.
No, the assumption is that it would all be worked out afterward, because they want to be sure that the annexation goes through before they get that happens.
You got any other questions for
I do. Okay. When this first came up, they said that a resident of Mills River was wanting to annex in, or a resident of Henderson County that lived by Mills River was wanting to voluntarily annex their property into Mills River. Is he a resident there?
The first parcel that we're discussing is owned by Lots Properties, and Mr. Lots is one of the principals. The second parcel that you would be considering is owned by Mr. Lots and his wife, and they do live there.
They do.
So
Okay.
he lives in Henderson County, but he's only a resident on the second parcel.
Okay. Well, odd things happen, and I had something pop up on my phone the other day, and I thought, really? I don't understand this, so I need a little clarification. And it popped up on the Realtor.com, and it said a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,142 square foot property is for rent as of December the 1st for $1,900 a month. And in reading down below there, let me read this. It said, a newly updated 2-bedroom, 2-bath basement apartment centrally located in beautiful Mills River, 8 minutes from Asheville Airport, amenities included central air, central heat, dishwasher, fridge, update kitchen, bathroom. We'll skip on down through there. And it says, date available December the 1st, $1,900 a month rent, $1,500 security deposit required. Please submit the form on this page or contact Annette Lutz, who's a realtor, to learn more. This is property managed by a responsible landlord using available landlord software.
Sandra, we are aware that the home is for sale, but it is also has an apartment with it that is for rent. It is not a requirement of annexation that they live on the property.
But I just, I was told he was a resident.
He's a resident of Henderson County.
Okay, so he don't live there.
He right now lives in the house at 227 Ray Hill Road,
Okay.
but it is for sale.
Okay.
I think there's an apartment in the basement of that house, isn't?
Yes, there is an apartment as well. He right now owns the entire property and lives on part of the property.
Okay.
If I may, I spoke to Mr. Watts on the phone. He said he couldn't be here tonight because of a church event, but just to shed some light, he does live there currently. They had plans to list the house for sale before he even considered annexation. And he wants to remain living on actually the first parcel with no address. So his plan, which again, when we do rezonings, we don't consider specific development plans, which is why the board considered everything in mixed use that could happen there. But Mr. Watts basically said I could share this. His plan is he can build 5 houses on that about 6-acre parcel right now with county zoning. If he incorporates into Mills River and uses our development regulations and density requirements, he can get 1 more, just with the lay of the land, with the stream going through. But his intent through Lots Properties is to build 5 houses here, 6 if it's incorporated into Mills River, and he eventually intends to sell this larger home, which again, it does have a complete basement, separate apartment, separate entrance, and then live on in one of the houses that he built on that other lot.
I'll get to you in just a second, Chief. Me and you've discussed this. I think we need to discuss it in front of the whole board, this potential, if I'm standing here looking if residential restrictions probably should apply. But would that be considered spot zoning with mixed use coming right up against it?
So the planning board asked some similar questions. I did not have the answer on Tuesday, but I did some research. You can apply MR30 zoning here, and I talked to Mr. Watts after the planning board meeting and after the item was tabled, and he's fine with that. You do have to protect from a spot zoning challenge because again, it's clearly zoning a smaller area different from the surrounding area. But as long, that's why we do the reasonableness statements. As long as the planning board considers those items of reasonableness for the rezoning, and as long as council adopts a statement of reasonableness, we have that legal protection from a spot zoning challenge, which would basically be, if a neighbor were upset about it and were to take us to court over it. I also, learned that you don't always have to follow as staff, I always like to follow the comprehensive plan because it was, a lot of public input was put into that. But both the planning board and council are not bound by it. And again, because it's in Henderson County currently, our future land use map, even though everything around it's rural residential, does not apply at this time.
Chief, would you like to come up and speak?
Mr. Mayor, councilman, council members, appreciate the chance to talk here. The first thing I want to point out is the town limit lines. Everything that is from Chastain Hill to the intersection of Maple Swamp, both sides of the road, not talking the lots behind those first lots, but like where number 27 is and the next one down, those actually should still be in Etowah Horseshoes District. In an effort to clean up lines with Chief Livingston years ago, our district actually went beyond Maple Swamp to I think it was the next road on the right, isn't it, Rick? And to clean up those lines, we actually moved our fire district back to the intersection of Ray Hill and Maple Swamp. That being said, that will take that piece of property and kind of put it in a donut hole that is actually surrounded by Etowah Horseshoe. I'll read my statement and I will kind of leave it up to y'all as to how you want to do this. First off, I have no objections to the Lots property being inside the town of Mills River. It's their God-given right to be able to come into y'all's township. I have no reservations about that. What I'm going to talk about tonight has absolutely nothing to do with Chief Livingston, his department, or the services they provide for the citizens of his fire district. I have known Chief Livingston since I was a 14-year-old junior. I think the world of Rick. I've looked up to Rick coming up through the fire service through the years. And we have an excellent working relationship. The two departments we've often called each other sister departments. We're first due mutual aid to each other. But what I'm going to talk about Etowah Horseshoe in our department is not a reflection of we think we're better than Chief Livingston in his department. Rick runs an absolute exemplary fire department for the citizens of Mills River. But to give a little backstory in history, Etowah Horseshoe was established in 1964 and has provided fire protection to that area for almost 60 years. Starting next year will be our 60th year protecting that area. Mills River Fire and Rescue was established in 1968. During those few years difference, Etowah Horseshoe covered fire protection in the Mills River area. I actually have a picture at our station of some of Etowah's guys fighting a car fire just this side of where Mills River Ingalls is. So, but with that being said, we're actually, in 2007, we added 2 substations. One is currently on Brickyard, one is on 64 and Horseshoe. It is actually 2.2 miles from that building to that piece of property. We have actually, within the last couple of weeks, have broken ground on that piece of that station in Horseshoe. We're going to add an addition to where we can house 24-hour guys there. Upon completion of that substation, there will be 2 firefighter EMTs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, 2.2 miles from that building. With this addition, I believe we're able to deliver enhanced services to all that area. That means a fire truck or an EMT on the scene faster, which saves lives and property. It is easy to move a line on a town map and place a parcel of property that is surrounded by a current fire district and another fire district can have effects on the 911 system. I would have to go look and pull it up to see that 005 and the 27, are they assigned to us or are they assigned to Mills River? But when you take a piece of property like that and draw it out and it creates a donut hole, sometimes when people call 911, it actually shows their address. But a lot of times to help the dispatcher help us, they will actually look at the map. And when you arbitrarily draw a line and take a donut hole out of a fire district that is surrounded by someone else's, it actually creates a little confusion at the 911 center and could actually delay either us or Mills River Fire Department responding to that. You know, it already happens in other areas of the county. We've got a piece for mine and Chief Livingston's districts at Maple Swamp, and you know, sometimes they give it to us, sometimes they give it to them. And, you know, in the end, no one cares what the side of the fire truck says when they have an emergency. But I believe with us being able to staff that station, not only are we going to be able to get to that area a whole lot quicker, but by staffing that station, I'm going to run mutual aid a lot faster to Mills River, and I'm going to be able to run mutual aid a lot faster to our neighboring department, Mountain Home. I would personally like to see or propose to the council to do just like we did on the track on Pole Bridge Road. We have a contract with y'all that it's actually the last houses in there are in the town of Mills River, but we provide fire protection. I would like to do the same thing with this parcel right here. Is I have no objections that it goes into the township, but leave the fire protection and that coming to us. That's what I would like to propose to this council.
Okay, any questions for Chief President?
Thank y'all.
Back on the top, don't leave us. Rick, you got any input on this situation?
I just wish property owners wouldn't do this. First and foremost, I want to reiterate what Chief Huggins said. We work great together. We have for many, many years. We'll continue to do that as long as he's the chief at Etowah Horseshoe and I'm the chief at Mills River. There's no conflicts, no problems between the two fire departments. And I would just say, and I'm completely in agreement with everything that Mike said. I would just say from an emergency services standpoint, and I'm talking about all emergency services, but, and again, I make the mistake of thinking from a common sense standpoint sometimes, but good straight lines make a whole lot more sense than a chopped up boundary line. Roads, for instance, one side of the road's at a horseshoe, one side of the Mills River. That makes sense. That makes it easy for his department and my department as well. But like he said, when you start chopping things up like this, it at least has the potential to create a lot of problems. Now, on a structure fire, both departments are going to be coming anyway. That's not an issue. But with all other emergency calls, a vehicle fire, a wildland fire, a medical emergency, you're only getting one department unless we call for mutual aid assistance. So I would just throw that out there. Good straight lines make a whole lot of sense to me as far as town boundaries go. That's just my opinion.
So Rick, while you're right there, is the Wise property with the pond on it, do you cover that side of the road or you do? Okay. So, but there's, it's gonna be just right there, as far as fire departments go, it's gonna be out, like I say, down that whole end of it.
I'm not, we'll provide protection. That's not an issue. Right. But it just makes sense, in my opinion, for them to keep it based on what's around it.
Shannon, just for clarification, our line on the one side of Ray Hill, as you're going away from 280, stops at Maple Swamp.
Okay.
On this side of Maple Swamp. The other side, it continues to, as you're looking at that map, where it's kind of grayed out.
Yep.
So it's on the way up the hill to the Antioch Baptist Church.
So, ask this, so how big of it might be a question for Daniel, but how big of a problem is this, would it be for this, to develop this contract if these people want in Mills River?
Well, as with anything that you ask of staff, we're happy to do it.
All right, question, so found out for that.
And also one other point of clarification. Chief Huggins talked about a contract for them to cover the properties on Polbridge Road. We actually de-annexed those through the legislature, so they're no longer in the town of Mills River.
So how much money are we talking here for this contract? For the fire contract?
Until we find out how much annual debt payments that Etowah Horseshoe Fire is carrying, we don't know. But since it's a 0.032% of their fire district, I'd be surprised if it's more than just a few $100s.
I'm saying if we entered into a contract where they still did it, that would just go on forever instead of 5 years.
There's actually a statute that requires that it goes into Mills River Fire because that's the one that we contract with. We can't continue, we cannot contract with Etowah Horseshoe to cover those.
So that doesn't work with what has been proposed.
Not well. It's obviously it's an absolute question for our attorney, but as I understand it, no.
So isn't there something like that, and Mr. Ruthven can speak to this better than I can, but isn't there something like that in place with Fletcher currently on another piece of property?
I don't want to argue with Sue because she's certainly the expert and I'm not. But I would just encourage you to check into this because what used to be Continental Tevis, which everybody knows the story behind that, that's been here for a while. The town of Fletcher jumped across the river and annexed that property before Mills River incorporated as a town. But the town of Fletcher contracted with Mills River Fire Department to provide fire and first responder protection to that facility just because it made sense. It's closer to us, faster response time, substation a half-mile away. So the town of Fletcher does contract with us to cover that. So I think, and again, I'm not arguing because I don't know. I'm certainly not an expert, but I think there is some provision, some way to contract with that Oil Horseshoe Fire Department.
And I think we're talking about two slightly different things.
Okay.
You're talking about actually contracting for the fire protection. And I'm talking about collecting taxes. And for collection of taxes purposes, the statute pushes it into Mills River Fire. It doesn't mean we can't contract with Etowah Horseshoe for fire protection.
And maybe this is not even legal, I don't know, but can you collect the fire tax on those two properties if you decide to annex them? But can you assess and collect the fire tax and just forward that straight on to Etowah Horseshoe Fire Department?
I do know we would have to have a contract.
Okay.
And as to whether we can contract with two, that's a question for our attorney. We also have the issue of two different tax rates.
Right.
Because that's what happens with now, currently, with the Continental property, correct? The town of Fletcher pays you the fire tax.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Builder fire.
We have a contract with the town of Fletcher that actually goes through the end of 2025. That was what I would consider a long-term contract. I think we did it for 20 years.
The town of Fletcher collects the tax and
Yes,
sends you a check.
that's correct. Yes, sir.
And it's a set amount regardless of,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Like it's not vacant now, you collect.
Well, it varies based.
Depending on the tax evaluation.
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
But I'm sitting here thinking, as this thing gets, if they do build 5 or 6 houses, what he would need to protect it now is totally different than the finished product.
And that's true. And I didn't know all the details of the Continental Tevs. I didn't know they pay you. I still think that's a contract. I'm just not sure. Now we're into definitely, I need our attorney.
Right.
That's why we ask these big questions.
And
There's a lot more to
I
it.
appreciate that.
Yeah, welcome to Mills River. Yeah. What else showed up?
I guess I would, while you're asking the attorneys questions, we need to actually put numbers to it because we're in the business of making money. So we need to make sure that after we pay out somebody else's fire department, we're still gonna make money off of annexing this in the future. Wouldn't we? We wouldn't want this to infinitely cost us money.
And you're right. And that would be all written into the terms of a contract somewhere. No, you're not going to write all of that into the terms, but
Yeah.
we're going to get credit for the property values.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the term in the contract would be how much you pay them.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Okay.
all the rest of your town is paying a lower fire tax rate. So how it works out, I have no idea.
Yeah, that's gonna be a little bit tricky, I think, because there are two different rates.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Which is higher? Which rate is higher? Edibles, okay. So, we we're just in discussion about this, so we've set the public hearing anyway for doing that tonight, so are we far enough along? Do we need to visit 227 Ray Hill Road, house and all tonight? Or do we seek advice from counsel or our attorney as to how we even do the fire protection on either parcel? Because it's gonna have the residents on it, it's gonna be more critical to get that done, or
I think it's certainly council's pleasure. There's no reason if you have these kind of questions on this, that we can't table both of them. And not set a public hearing.
I would ask this of the board though, do we have any questions that's coming to mind now that we could seek answers to bring to the next visit on this?
Well, finding out for me that the house is like subdivided, that there's two separate dwellings there in one, answered a question for me, because I thought, I thought he was a resident, and then I saw that and I thought, well, maybe he's not.
Michael, hearing some of our discussion, is it brought anything that, to your mind that we need to address? No. Okay. Daniel? No.
Good. Mm-mm.
Table it for now, we really don't have to set a date, correct? But we really don't know when we can get everybody on board with this.
And that's right. And it sounds like you're not even at the point where you're ready to ask me to investigate the sufficiency of the application. That would be the next step. But we can table the whole thing, table this one, and then because they're separate items, the motion would, I prefer you do it by motion and then include both.
Okay. Before we do that, would it be appropriate to ask Michael to take this back to the planning board and discuss what he has found since Tuesday about the possibility of making M130? Is how we could do that now to see if there's if that helps them in any way.
So the planning board tabled the item till the December meeting. And again, the information I delivered tonight was all new, and so none of them have heard that. But we will revisit it at the December meeting, again, just for the assignment of the zoning.
I would feel better if they was more on board with it. That's what we do, if we would like to do.
Michael, I might be wrong here, but I was on the planning board for a long time. And I just can't get my head around that not being spot zoning, because everything else that's even remotely close to it is mixed use. So I can't get my head around it not being spot zoning.
On a map, it will appear like it. And because of that, the town could be more liable for a spot zoning challenge. Again, someone suing the town that it was spot zoned capriciously, with no thought, by the boards. But state law says that if you adopt a statement of reasonableness and if you adopt a statement of consistency, as we always do, that cannot be challenged in a court. And again, the plan is a guiding document, like all plans. That's usually where staff's recommendations come from, but you are not beholden to it. If you, I don't know if you remember Miles View Drive going from light industrial to MR30, that was against the comprehensive plan, and through that process, basically amended the future land use map.
I'll say this, but looking at it is, I can't get my head around it not being spot. First off, and I like the ideal, I like the straight lines and that is going to be, it's like a thumb sticking out in the air on the town's limits. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'll just be quiet.
Can I say something
You
as
can
a
step up to
planning
the mic,
board
please.
member? So with regard, I made the motion to table the decision on zoning while recognizing that it is maybe more efficient for the staff to have had that voted on Tuesday in advance of your discussions about annexation. Personally, I think it's putting the cart before the horse. So if the town is going to annex, if the council decides to annex the property, well, then we need to have a decision on the zoning. And I understand it may delay things, but if the town is not going to annex the property, then it doesn't seem like something we should be setting a precedent for. So that, just to give you a little bit other insight, I know some of the other members spoke, but that was personally some of the thoughts that were going through my mind with regards to this. Is it just seemed unnecessary for the planning board to make a decision on zoning of a property that wasn't yet in Mills River. So I think it, again, from my point of view, I wanted the town council to have an opportunity to consider whether or not it was even going to annex this property.
But touching on what Lisa just said, Michael, would this set a precedent that might cause the town trouble in the future? Well, you did it here, why can't you do it up here?
Well, again, the planning board's role is for a recommendation, and I have both the statutes pulled up. So basically, 160D 202G, if a city annexes, including an area regulated by the county, basically it just says the local government can consider both zoning assignment and annexation concurrently at the same time. But again, the final zoning decision made by council in a public hearing can only occur after annexation happens. So in working with our town clerks, we came up with a schedule where the planning board would, again, preliminarily hear the request. And again, the planning board has a right to take 60 days or 2 meetings to consider a zoning assignment request. But there's no precedent set because it's just something allowed in state law. I mean, the other option, that is open is we could wait till it's annexed and then go into that 60-day period. So there is time to do it then as well.
As far as council's concerned, what reasons do we see that we wouldn't invite them in as long as we can work out something with the fire department? Any? Do we have any? Sure, we can figure it out. It'll take some lawyering to figure it out, but we figure it out.
Is it going to change the density as to what's already in that area?
Well, not as far as Mills River's concerned, but it will as far as the county's concerned.
Well, the houses around it.
So Daniel, that property is zoned currently in the county R2R.
Mm-hmm.
Can you pull that up and show us?
Yeah.
It's on the results there.
I believe it's R2.
Is it not?
Not R2.
It's not 2R. Well, then
There's R2R adjacent to it. So the dark orange you'll see is the R2R, the yellow is the R2. But both of those county zoning districts, and again, I'm not an expert at county zoning, but when I looked it up, it's 1 dwelling unit per acre. In the town, it's 1 dwelling unit per 30,000 square feet, 0.69 acres.
But I think even in R2 and R2R, you can, a special use, you can get it down to 1 unit per half acre.
Different type of development. I'm multifamily though, right? Well, the county, I mean, Mr. Lotz told me this. So again, I'm not an expert on county zoning regulations, but I believe the county also allows accessory dwellings, whereas that's, I think we had that conversation. That's not something our zoning ordinance considers. So we treat everything as a full single family dwelling. One thing Mr. Lotz mentioned to me is possibly putting an accessory dwelling under county codes on the 227 Ray Hill property, the smaller one. That's something we would not allow.
Can he not go through Henderson County and get that zoned as he wishes? With like a special variance or something?
I don't believe so, and I don't think for what he's trying to achieve.
Is this not a good candidate for conditional? What is that one? What did we just do?
Conditional zoning.
Conditional zoning? Because then it's not a spot zone. And could you just copy and paste?
It's possible. You're saying basically creating a zoning district just for those properties with a specific like table of permitted uses. I mean, you could do it. The issue is it would need to be initiated by the property owner. So if he wanted to apply for a conditional zoning district, that's a possibility. But again, usually when you're annexing and just doing, again, he's not rezoning from one Mills River district to another. He's coming in and we're just trying to assign a zoning district to him. So usually in that circumstance, you choose one of your base zoning districts, mixed use MR30, one of the others, versus going to a conditional district, which would require, special application, special review process, additional public hearings, etc.
Is this going to open the door for more developers to go outside the town of Mills River and buy property up that's in Henderson County and then just try to annex it in to put developments in there?
There's no legal precedent set because, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sue, but town council's decision with annexation, can really be for any reason, for any purpose. So anyone can go buy a property adjacent to our limits and ask to be annexed contiguously, voluntarily. Again, the petition coming from the property owner, but council, it's purely at council's pleasure whether that happens or not.
Is that going to make us friends with Henderson County and neighbors of the bordering properties?
I don't know that answer, but again, this is not a town-initiated action. This property owner called me first and basically said, how do I do this?
The question is on it is basically what can be there versus what can't be there, depending on the zone that's applied later. I think first of all, we just need to think, is this something that we're going to consider? Are we tabling it for a reason that we would consider bringing this in? If not, then we move on tonight. We save everybody a lot of trouble. But if we're thinking about bringing this in, we just need to think about tonight, are we bringing it in? Then we got to work through this deal. We got to work through the zoning later. That's where we need to be tonight, I think. Is that a fair statement of staff? So
I'm not crazy about messing with the fire departments or 911 because when I need help now. So everybody would say that. And
saying that, we can't fix that. It can stay the same with just a piece of paper off to the side that's signed by me or Daniel, somebody in a check getting passed over. We'll figure that deal out. We're not sacrificing anybody's safety here, I don't think, in doing this. But I'm just asking, is this something we would consider doing if we can tie everything together and make it flow? If not, then we just need to move on. Say no to the annexation, or we'll move forward with the annexation. I think that's where we need to get to tonight.
are you wanting to take a poll?
Yes, I'll start with you.
I'd say probably not.
I'm open-minded to it. I'm not real crazy about Henderson County being more restrictive on the lot size than the town of Mills River. And I don't like it just being out there by itself.
Yeah.
The question that keeps coming back to me is, what's in it for the Mills River taxpayers? I mean, what are they gaining? I mean, obviously we know why the applicant is seeking voluntary annexation, but
Well, you could imagine if there was 6 houses built on it. $500,000 houses, that's $3 million worth of tax revenue that we'd be taxing.
Right.
5 or 6 years from now.
So what gives me heartburn is the simple fact we've spent an hour talking about land preservation, open spaces, and then by facilitating this, we're adding one more house to that property that wouldn't otherwise be there. So that's the heartburn I'm having. So,
That's why I say we got the option right here to put it away.
in this case, I'm not sure the juice is worth the squeeze. So I'm probably not in favor of annexing.
James.
I thought you were going to go next.
He always goes last.
I have reservations, but I'm also open to it because I think in the long run we could receive more tax dollars from it. But it does. And we would have control over it versus the county.
If
Well,
they
one-
built 6 houses and they were $500,000 houses, you would get $2,400 a year total.
But that would be tax, fire revenue or just our portion?
Just our portion.
Okay, thank you.
One way to make it not stick out like a thumb is we just do a whole section there and let the residents vote on it.
Just by talking to the residents, maybe you can pass over by there and see what you can get strummed up.
There you go.
What's yours? Because
I'm
I think it's
straight up.
2
I'll
and
tell you
2.
straight up, but you know I'm not bashful. I would invite them in. I would tell them tomorrow morning, we got issues we gotta work through with fire. Make sure they're on board with, whatever zoning takes place, and I would take the recommendation of the planning board as to what they wanted done with that. And as long as Michael could make it legally work and not have to battle in court over it, then I would be okay with that. Because, we got a revenue stream coming in, fire departments are still happy, and we got somebody that wants to live in the town of Mills River, in the town of Mills River. That's where I'm at with it.
And I think Mr. Malchek already said this, but whether it's MRMU or MR30, you can still do 30,000 square foot lot size, correct?
Yes.
So, I mean, the density doesn't change if those are the two zoning options presented to this council.
Mr. Lotz told me on the phone yesterday, just because of the lay of the land. So, I mean, there will be 5 houses there if it stays county zoning. I mean, I believe this is his retirement. If it becomes, and if it is annexed, just because of the lay of the land, he can only put one more house. So there's going to be 5 houses there under county zoning if his plan goes through, or there's going to be 6 houses there under Mills River zoning, again, if he follows through with that.
Is one house worth paying Henderson County and Mills River taxes?
He's not planning on paying that. He's not living in all 6. He's just living in one.
So he's gonna build them and sell them? Okay.
That would be my feeling of it. I haven't talked to the man, but I would think so.
But he's going to do that if it's in the town or in the county.
And this is not something that's probably going to ever be up for preservation. Just where it's at.
I'm just a little bit disappointed that they can build more houses in the town of Mills River than they can. Yeah.
Right.
That's just where I'm at.
Well,
Also build anything else though under MRMU.
Yeah.
I was going to say that's where we can look at mixed use stuff. Yeah.
So, I've got a Larry, Randy's a maybe.
I would like to hear what Sharon says on some of the issues
Okay.
that were raised tonight.
Okay, so I got a 1, maybe,
Currently, no.
certainly no, 2 no's.
I'm still at a maybe.
So, I don't know where maybe you put us.
that's 2 no's and maybe and a yeehaw.
I mean, would it be beneficial to hear what Sharon
I
says in
think
this?
so. I mean, as a board, I think it would be, to give him fair right to his property, I think we definitely should do that.
Mr. Mayor, if I may interject, I think where things are going is there's a lot of unanswered questions right now. And I think if you can give us another month to talk to Sharon, to do some calculations on the financial side of it, we can come back to you fully educated and give you all the information that you need to make an informed decision. I think that's only fair to the board and to the applicant at this point.
So on this and trying to get it back on the December? Is that what we're gonna try to do?
Yeah, we can do
We
that.
got room for it there?
We do now. We had 2 public hearings, 3, one to rezone and 2 for the annexations. So those are pushed back. Could we do that by motion? That to table it only because everything else with the annexation has to be done like with resolutions. It's very formal.
Okay, so would somebody please make me a motion to table this until the December 14th
I'll make a motion that we table this until the December 14th meeting
for both parties?
for both parcels.
Okay, and I need a second.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Anybody that feels free to get out of here, you're welcome, or you're welcome to stay. Yes, we're gonna take just a 5-minute bathroom break and we'll get back out there. Appreciate it. Thank you all.
Take care.
In here, we'll get started after a little short break. Daniel, when you get caught up, I think you're going to have the fire chief step up and speak about the ongoing brush fires.
Yes, sir. So we invited Chief Livingston here tonight just to give a quick update on the wildfires burning within the county right now. So I'm going to call Rick up to the podium, please, and just give us a quick update.
I'll try to be brief. First of all, thanks to the town for partnering with us on getting the word out about the burning ban. I contacted Daniel and Sue and asked if there was any way that we could throw it out there quickly, website, social media, whatever, and they did that, and I appreciate that very much. It's on our sign. It will remain on our sign as long as the ban's in effect. But if you folks can help us in any form or fashion, there's still a lot of folks out there that for whatever reason, they don't know there's a ban in effect. We've been responding to at least half a dozen calls per day to extinguish illegal fires. And it's, in every case, it's just the fact that folks haven't heard yet. They don't know, they haven't been educated that there's a ban in effect. So thanks for helping us out with that. Obviously, the fire danger situation is as bad as I've ever seen it. The potential is great. The same thing could easily happen in Mills River that's happened in Edneyville. And just a quick update, they refer to that as the Poplar Drive fire. But just a quick update on that, because Mills River Fire Department has been involved in that fire also, as have all the other fire departments in Henderson County. It's been a team effort. But it's 431 acres. It's 15% contained. The mayor had a question about that a while ago, and that's a very good question. Percent containment represents sections of fire line that pose no escape risk without further action from firefighters. If it were any other time of the year besides right now, you would see 100% containment instead of 15%. But because of the leaf fall that's still going on, there's a good dozer line, containment line around that entire fire. It's holding well. We've got crews over there 24/7 that are keeping that fire line clear of leaves and other plant debris. So what happens is, as long as those leaves are falling and covering the fire line at times, that they don't consider that containment. The potential is still there for escapement and fire spread. So does that answer your
Yes, sir.
question about that? So yes, there's a good solid fire line around all of that. It's holding well, but that's terminology that the North Carolina Forest Service uses. They're only giving it 15% at this point. So there have been 2 homes, 2 cabins, and 2 outbuildings have been destroyed in that fire, with another home sustaining major damage. Again, it's been a team effort that we have housed firefighters from other areas of the state in our station this week. They've been traveling from Mills River to Edneyville back and forth. We've had a brush truck over there for 3 days and a crew with it. We've had a tanker over there for 1 day and a crew with it. These firefighters work 12-hour operational periods, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Then we send another crew to swap out with them. So it's an ongoing thing. And I would just throw in that if we have a similar situation in Mills River, all those folks are going to come help us, just like we're helping them. That's just the way it works. This is probably not the time or the place for this, but maybe in some future meeting, future months or whatever, we can visit a little bit more. But a common problem that we have is that when folks build homes, everybody wants to live in the woods now. The wildland fire situation today is much, much, much different than it was 45 years ago when I first got in the fire service. You're comparing apples to oranges completely. But if you could just help us encourage folks, if they don't do anything except blow the leaves away from their house and clean the leaves out of their gutters, that in itself is a big help. And then, like I say, they build in the woods and there's no defensible area around their homes. You've got leaves, you've got native plants, people plant pampas grass, or miscanthus is the scientific name, but that's a terribly invasive plant, but they plant it right up against their homes and that stuff dries out and it's just like a torch. But just a little bit of common sense goes a really long way when folks are building their homes and maintaining their homes. They just don't think about the possibility of fire and what could happen. So again, I'm not going to bore you with that tonight, but
I got one question. It might arise, hopefully never arises in the town of Mills River, but I could see where it would arise to somebody like me or a council member or Daniel or even Michael. So when y'all come in to cut those lines, the Forest Service come in to cut the lines, do they have to get permission from a landowner?
no.
I could see the landowner calling some of us and say, hey, they just backed a bulldozer off here on my property and they're just going right up there and getting it.
I can't tell you what the law or the statute is, but the North Carolina Forest Service has authority to do whatever they need to do.
Okay, makes sense. Okay. Anybody got anything else for Rick while he's up?
May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Chief Livingston. I was reading the Hendersonville Lightning this week about Henderson County trying to coax the NC Forest Service into issuing a statewide burning ban, and they talked about the limitations of a county burning ban. It got a little confusing. I don't know if you could help explain the difference between the limits of a county burning ban versus the statewide from the NC Forest Service.
Yes, sir. Good question. I appreciate you bringing that up, Jeff. I should have had it on my list to explain to you anyway, and I forgot to. But in a perfect world, you want the county to implement a burning ban at the same time that the North Carolina Forest Service implements their burning ban. The reason for it is when the county issues a burning ban, it's only for 100 feet from the structure, the home. It extends outward 100 feet around the home. That's it. 101 feet and beyond, all that is North Carolina Forest Service jurisdiction. They control all that. So if the county hypothetically, if the county issues a burning ban and the Forest Service doesn't, which often happens, then folks are very confused because what that says from a legal standpoint is that you cannot burn within 100 feet of your house, but 101 feet or further, yes, you can burn. So obviously that creates a nightmare for us and the North Carolina Forest Service and law enforcement and everybody else. So, and I'm sure that others of you besides Jeff have read the newspaper and watched the news and all this stuff. And for whatever it's worth, I did do some work behind the scenes. I made some phone calls and I said, look, it's time for a burning ban. And this was at the state and the county level as well. The Commissioner of Agriculture, Steve Troxler, ultimately he's the head of the North Carolina Forest Service. He's the top dog. Steve's a great guy. He used to be my boss. He's got a lot of good common sense, in my opinion, but he gets a heck of a lot of political pressure from outside entities who are pushing him not to implement a ban in most cases. It's okay to do it, but don't do it where I'm at. That's the kind of thing that he has to deal with. But does that kind of address your question?
The article wasn't quite as concise or as well explaining it, so thank you for that delineation between NC Forest Service and the county's jurisdiction.
Like I say, in a nutshell, the county has control over 100 feet out from your home. Beyond that, They have no control. That's the North Carolina Forest Service. And to get the counties and the state on the same page is tough.
Gotcha. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
At some time in the future, I would still like to sit down and discuss emergency plans for Mills River. I know we've discussed this before, and they say that we go by Henderson County's plan. We still don't know what that is.
Right. And I'd be happy to do that. For whatever reason, I think the county manager was reluctant, for whatever reason, to have Jimmy Brissy and maybe somebody else, I'm not sure. Toby Limble, I believe, was coming with Jimmy, but at that particular time, they were reluctant, or the county manager was hesitant about letting them come. Now, I don't know what that's all about, but no, there's a plan in place, and it works very well. We've used it on several occasions, and I have no problem sharing all that with you. That's no problem at all.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Moving on to our fiscal year 2024 pay study. Daniel, I'll let you lead us in that.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So this year, as part of the budgeting process, we allocated funding to hire a consultant to conduct a pay study for the town. The last time we did this was in 2019, and that study was completed also with a consultant and implemented later that year. I'm going to introduce David Hill from the Piedmont Triad Regional Council, who completed this study for us. He's done a number of studies in the immediate region, including Brevard and Black Mountain and several others. He has a presentation that he'll go through, which I think will explain a lot of the, if you had a chance to read through the actual written report, the presentation breaks it down a little bit more digestible form. The recommendation is to implement this plan at 100%. The total implementation cost is $116,000. And that includes all of the associated payroll costs, like Social Security and tax withholdings that would be associated with that. We're recommending a time of service model, which looks at not only individual pay classifications, but recognizes employees for time of service to give them recognition for their commitment to the town. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to David Hill. You would please come up and I'll make the presentation.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you for doing this for us.
And thank you very much for the proclamation for the veterans. And not speaking for the two guys sitting here behind me, but we certainly appreciate that recognition. We didn't do what we did to be recognized. But I think for those listening or watching, the recognition and appreciation actually needs to go to city and town councils and county commissioner boards and so forth. You guys are the closest to the citizens when it comes to interacting, and just witnessing tonight the conversations and topics that you guys have covered tonight. We should be giving you a plaque or some recognition. So, thank you. I spent the last couple of months taking a look at your workforce, comparing your workforce to practically all the other local government workforces in this geographic area. The PowerPoint that I'll go through, for the most part, is general. It's just an overview of the study, the process, the procedure. But please stop me anytime. Daniel told me I was in control.
Okay.
Because I have
the button.
I've got the control button. But at the beginning of any study I do, the very first thing I do is receive from the local government is a printout of all the employees, all the information for the most part that is public information. And from that, I take a snapshot to take a look at what that workforce looks like. at the beginning of the study. That provides me an opportunity to establish some benchmarks, to establish a starting point, certainly. So as we go through, you have a workforce of 10 regular full-time employees. The information that I'm going to talk about applies more to workforces that are greater in number. Where you have a small workforce like yourself, 10, just what happens with one has a disproportionate effect on what I'm going to talk about now. So when I take a look at all that data that I collect, the world view I have of a workforce, and again, assuming that the sample size is large enough, the distribution of whatever that measurement is should look like the standard bell curve. So we're talking about standard deviation. And in a mature workforce, and my definition of a mature workforce is that you have an average years of employment of between 8 and 10 years. And we'll take a look at that in the next slide. But in a mature workforce, within this standard deviation, regardless of the metric that I'm taking a look at, you should be able to find 2/3 of your employees in the middle 1/3 of that distribution. Now, with that said, before I go to the next slide, and as I said to Daniel when we first met, I have an inability to recreate bell curves. My bell curves look like St. Louis arches. Now, that one doesn't even look like a St. Louis arch. But one of the very first things I take a look at is how long have employees been working here? And you've got an average years of service of 7.6 years. But you can see you've got the tallest bars over on that left side, so you do have proportionally significant more younger employees by seniority. Now, I'm not picking on Sue, but Sue is that standalone bar over there on that far right side. That arch represents a 20-year career. So you can see you've got about 4 employees who've been with you greater than 10 years. The remainder with you less than 10, but an average of about 7.6, which in our definition puts you just slightly below the definition of a mature workforce. These two slides should go hand in hand. They should almost be mirrors of each other. This is where I measure where employee salaries are in relation to the minimum salary of their pay grade. And each of your pay grades has a 50% range. And what that means is your maximum salary is 50% greater than the minimum. The midpoint, the black bar in the center, it's called midpoint, but a better definition of that or better description of that is the market value. So if you're looking at the value of a position, and assuming that a brand new employee is going to be earning somewhere down on that far left side of the scale, an employee who's been in their position about 8 to 10 years should have a salary about that midpoint of a salary grade range. Their salary should be about the market value for their grade range. So you can see that you don't have any employees who have salaries less than 10% above their grade range. The interpretation I have of these two slides, this is showing employment by year. So you've got the two largest bars over there on the left side. So then when I look at this one, my immediate interpretation of this kind of image is that the salary grade ranges are not competitive and that the town is probably having to bring employees to work at salaries greater than the minimum. So again, if I'm looking at that chart, I'm almost immediately thinking when I work statewide. But these two charts should look very similar. And what stands out with this one is that the town's salary grade ranges probably are not competitive in this local market. And that the town, as you hire new employees or make salary adjustment recommendations. You're having to do so knowing that you're competing with the market and your grade ranges aren't in line with the market. That was my initial interpretation of these two charts. Now, one of the other things I take a look at is your pay grade ranges. The one on the left is your current. The one on the right is my proposed, and that'll be part of my recommendations. You currently don't have anybody in grade 7. So one of my recommendations is that you eliminate grade 7. But you can also see that your current grade ranges in with grade 31. My recommendation extends that to grade 36. And I'll talk more about that later. But you've got a 50% range. That's pretty standard in the state. A 5% differential from one grade to the next. That's typical. So I don't have any adjustments that I would recommend regarding that component. And there's nothing wrong with your grade ranges. My task then is to use those grade ranges, those market comparisons, and then make recommendations on what pay grade best fits each of the positions that you have. So the process, of course, I had initial discussions with Daniel. We talked process, procedure, timelines, and so forth. And then I came on site, held meetings with the employees, talked to the employees about the study, the process, the procedure, the importance of them completing a 12-page questionnaire. And each employee completed this 12-page questionnaire. And while I was here, I also met with department directors, talked to them about their department, the positions within their department, just to get a good feel of the organization. And the whole process is just me gathering as much information as I can from as many sources as I can to make the best recommendations that I can. The primary document is that 12-page questionnaire that each employee filled out. That's 12 pages of each employee telling me exactly what they did, every element of their job. There were also questions in there designed to capture the information required to help make the recommendation of under Fair Labor Standards Act if their position is exempt or non-exempt. Under Americans with Disabilities Act, there are quite a number of questions in there regarding the physical demands and the environmental conditions of the job. Stooping, bending, crawling, climbing. Do you work outside? Do you work inside? Are you exposed to fumes, temperatures? All of those physical demands and environmental conditions under ADA are included in those 12 pages. So it was a collection of everything about every job. So anyway, all the employees completed those. That was reviewed by the supervisors. I ended up with all of those for review. At the same time, I'm collecting all of that same information from local governments that we'll look at in a couple of minutes. So I'm collecting data from a lot of places. And then it's just the analysis, the collection, the interpretation, and just making all of this come together, make all the parts fit together. And I met with Daniel. We reviewed my preliminary findings, my preliminary recommendations. We worked through those, and that's what I'll be presenting to you tonight. So the market comparisons. What you're going to look at right here is the list of those local governments. I can tell you I'm still waiting on Tryon to send me information. I do have information from all the others. Of that list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've done studies for 5 of those local governments on that list. So I've got data from all of those places to match up with the positions that you have here. And then, of course, all of you understand, and I'm sure there's no interpretation lost when I tell you that when I compare a position in Asheville to a position in Mills River, the larger the local government, the more specialized every position is. The smaller the local government, the more hats everybody wears. So it gets into an analysis of percentages of time worked. If I'm comparing the clerk here to the clerk in Asheville, there's a lot of moving parts to that kind of comparison. And the same goes with every position in Mills River when I look at all of those positions in those other local governments. So I worked through all the process. This is the basic document that I use. This is just, every one of your positions has a worksheet that looks just like this. So what this is a collection of data specific to, in this example, parks maintenance specialist. So what I do is from each of those local governments, I collect the data regarding what pay grade do they have that position in. And over on about the middle, a little to the right of the center, is a column titled actual. That's the actual salary or the average salary that they pay employees who are in that particular classification. So then all of that data below, the blue line, the first of those lines is Mills River. So for parks maintenance specialist, that position currently is in grade 8. That has a minimum salary of $30,291, a max of the $45,760. The average salary of, and correct me, I think at the time we started the study, there were just 2 employees in that position. In the process, you were hiring.
It was the first week, I think, so he did not.
Okay. So the average salary for the employees in this classification was $41,800. The information directly below that is the average of all that information above, followed by the median of all that information above. The percentages to the right, over on the far right side, that tells me that the average salary for a Mills River Parks maintenance specialist is 3.5% greater than the average of that market. The market is 6.2% less when you look at the median. Over on the left side is where I'm actually measuring what pay grade do I need to recommend that position go into so that you're competitive to that market. So you can see on the left side, those percentages, 17.7%. That means that the market is 17.7% greater than the Mills River minimum salary. 16.5% regarding the median. The highlighted numbers to the left of that is I take that picture, that data was current as of the time each of those local governments sent me that information. Most of that data has already changed. The pay grades typically don't change. Salaries change probably the very next day after Asheville sent me that data. Somebody quit, somebody new was hired, somebody got promoted, somebody had some other personnel action. So that's taking that data, its current value. The highlighted dollar amount that you see is my projection that that information that we're looking at will increase, I'm guessing at this point, 3% on or shortly after July 1st. So on or shortly after the beginning of the next fiscal year, all of that data from those local governments is going to increase on average about 3%. So that then becomes important because I'm not going to look at where should I make the recommendation that a position be based on current data. I'm going to look at what does my recommendation need to be looking to the next fiscal year. So that's where I came up with grade 12. So the position currently is in grade 8. You're about 17, close to 18% below market. So my recommendation for that position is to move it to grade 12, which would have a minimum of 36.8. So you can see that 36.8 then compares favorably to the 36.7 and the 36.5, those two projected numbers. Now, with this particular classification, I think my interpretation, evaluation, that there probably should be 2 different levels in this. And you can see my little note below that. I would, one of my recommendations is to actually create 2 classifications from this particular position. A maintenance specialist 1 and a maintenance specialist 2. And there would be differing or higher levels of duties, responsibilities, and authority, skill levels that the 2 would have, or the person would be in the grade 12. The 1, which would be more of an entry-level general maintenance kind of person, would be in grade 10. I'm only going to show this one tonight. I'm not going to sit here and go through every one of these tonight, but every one of your positions has a worksheet just like this that's specific to their classification, including the manager, and all that data, the collection, everything over on the right side, the range. The CR column is comp ratio. That's just a measurement I use. That's measuring where salaries are in relation to the midpoint. I'll touch on that a little later as we go through. Percentage above minimum. All of those are just measurements I collect that help me better understand where salaries are in relation to pay grade ranges. So I've looked at all of that data for each of your positions. I then made initial recommendations about what pay grade I thought each of your positions needed to go in based on that kind of comparison for each of your recommendations. So the recommendations that I've gone over with Daniel, we've discussed them, we've taken a look at them. And with any recommendation I make, there are always options within options. So it's not like I come to you with this fix-all kind of option. Those don't exist. So my recommendations tonight is to adopt that recommended pay plan that you already saw. I spent probably 3 seconds looking at, but adopt a new pay plan and then assign each position to the pay grade that's supported by the market comparison. And then secondly, establish each employee's salary in accordance with the years of service model. We'll take a look at that in the next slide. And then approve the establishment of a Parks Maintenance Specialist 1 and 2 classification. And then I have some other general recommendations that are in my report. Years of service, this could be time and position, this could be based on any number of other metrics. The ones we looked at, this one probably was the best fit for Mills River. This is just a mathematical calculation of where a salary should be in the pay grade range based on years of service, assuming that an employee's salary would reach midpoint in the 8th year of their employment. Now, the one on the right side is a model designed, it's the very same thing, but designed to get employee salaries to the midpoint in their 10th year of employment. I could have done 9, I could have done any other number, but my definition of a mature workforce, 8 to 10 years, if an employee's been in their position working for you in that 8 to 10 year period, their salary should be somewhere about the midpoint. So my recommendation is to go with this 8-year model, which again just makes a calculation of where an employee's salary should be based on their years of service. And then just turning that over on its side so you can get that relationship to the pay grade range. The minimum, the midpoint, the max. So if you lay that little matrix on its side, you can see that a brand new employee, no experience, would come to work at or near the minimum. And then based on their years of service, their salary would be set and when they would reach the midpoint in their 8th year of employment. The recommendations, pay grade recommendations based on those market comparisons. And Parks Maintenance Specialist was the example we looked at, currently in grade 8. Recommendation would be to create the 2 positions. One would go to grade 10, the other one to grade 12. And then you can see from that chart the current grade assignment for each of your positions and my recommended grade for each of the positions. Now, regarding employee salaries, we looked at a number of different ways to administer employee salaries. This is a standalone. I spent 85% of my time focused on just the positions. without regard to individual employees. Because that was the most important part, making sure that we got Mills River's positions in pay grades that were competitive to the market. So in that last 15% of my time is where we then start focusing on employee salaries. Where should employee salaries be? If we're going to place these positions in these higher pay grades, one of the very first things I have to consider and take a look at is salary compression. The maintenance specialist position would be the one to use as the example here, because that position has 3 employees in it. If that position is going to now move from grade 8 to grade 10, or perhaps 12, that means that if my recommendations are adopted, that the very first or the very next employee who comes to work in that classification is going to come to work at the salary of the higher grade 10 and 12. Current employees are working in grade 8. So one of my first considerations when I do this is take a look at how would current employee salaries be affected if this is adopted and brand new employees come to work at the higher rate. So as I work through all of that, I went over a number of different options with Daniel. We took a look at options that were in the $250,000 ranges and a number of ones that were less than the 100,000. But the one that we looked at that not only maintained the integrity of the study from those market comparisons to the positions, the pay grade assignments, we then took a look at focusing on how long employees have been working here, creating that model that used that time, that years of service model that we just looked at, but then took a look at individual salaries based on their length of service and modifying that little model or that years of position model a little bit. We converted that because if we use that model, the difference between one year and the next is about 2.7%. We reduced that to recognize each year of employment with 1.5%. So for each year of service, we calculated 1.5% for where an employee's salary should be based on their years of service. We then took a look at that and said that there were three employees who were not positively affected by that adjustment. So the recommendation at that point was to ensure that each employee in this process received a minimum of 3.5%, or the 1.5% for each year of service, whichever is greater. But there were 3 employees who are recommended for a 3.5% because they would have been negatively affected by the other model. So that's just a very brief, quick overview of the study. We looked at a number of different options. The one I'm bringing to you tonight, you can see it, as Daniel said, about $116,000. 93.4 of that is actual salaries. 23.3 is FICA, retirement, and other payroll associated costs. So that was a very quick run through. I'm here to answer any questions that you have.
Questions? Fire away.
Well, help me understand. Well, let me back up. We only looked at one position in your presentation for the park specialist. But those hard numbers, the Mills River employee that was on that chart, while our ranges are skewed too low to be competitive, the salary was on par with others.
That particular example was.
And so let's just run with that one. So when you apply the year of service, is that going to move employees to the mid-range or where the new recommended competitive market range? Or I guess I'm trying to figure out, it looks like, well, we only looked at one, but I'm just saying, if most employees at Mills River are somewhere competitive with the surrounding municipalities, however, our ranges are too low, when we apply the year of service, the 8 year, and do the 1.5% per year, 3.5 one time, where does that put the employees in that revised range?
Actually, some of them beyond the midpoint. The model we used would place employees' salaries at midpoint in the 8th year. So then we modified that to go to the 1.5% per years of service. So that actually extended beyond 8 years. So if an employee's been here for greater than 8 years, they're still going to get 1.5% for each year's of service. So if you go back to that one chart, you've got 4 employees who've been with you greater than 10 years. So right now, this recommendation still is recognizing each one of those employees 1.5% for each of those years.
And then the other thing, and back to years of service, is this an automatic step increase? I mean, are we adopting that step each year, or is this just a one-time correction to get everybody in a new competitive range?
This is a one-time implementation. You then, next year or the following year, could then go back to that other model, that one. And then that one actually could be the one going forward. And then, and a lot of places that I work with use this model not only to make adjustments to current employees, but they use this model if, and you don't have a police department, but I'll use police officer as an example. You have a vacancy for a police officer. You have a candidate who has 3 years of law enforcement experience. A lot of places I work with use this model also to establish if I'm now going to hire this person with 3 years of relevant law enforcement experience, I'm going to look on this chart at the 3rd year and say, okay, your starting salary is not going to be our minimum. Your salary is going to be where it would be to recognize your 3 years of service that you're bringing to us. So we modified this model. Again, there's about 2.7% differential from one year to the next in this model. So we reduced that down to the 1.5%, but didn't stop at that 8th year, nor did we stop at the 10th year. We recognized the employee's total years of service, whether it was 1 year or 20 years.
So going back to that last screen, if we use that model, it would be that we could do that plus cost of living to control the salary from that point forward and feel
that would be almost your cost of living.
Okay.
If you use that model, and right now the 8-year model is set up with about a 2.7% differential from one year to the next.
Okay.
So that pretty much is a 2.7% movement
every year.
Every year.
So you would not do a cost of living or COLA or?
You would still want to do those because that movement assumes that the pay grade range stays static, doesn't move. So on top of that, you may want to adjust your pay grade ranges, not necessarily employee salaries, because employee salaries are going to be adjusted by that model, but you still would need to adjust your pay grade ranges every other year, every 3 years. You still need to be competitive with your grade ranges. So you would do basically it wouldn't necessarily be a cost of living. It would be a market adjustment to stay competitive to the market. The 2.7% from that. And if the cost of living was 3%, then you could adjust the scale to make up that difference between 3 and 2.7.
Well, what's the most prudent way to keep your range competitive to municipalities? Just have occasional studies and bring consultants to take a snapshot of everything that's happening economically, or is it, I was wondering what went off the rails between 2019 and 2023. Obviously, it stayed static, and then if we opted not to keep the range static, I just didn't know, is it something you just revisit with the help of a consultant, or is it something that's just baked into the cake and you just keep moving your ranges up?
Staff could do the recommendation that I would give to you is you could have somebody like me come in every 3, 4, 5 years and just reset everything. Or you could go ahead and reset based on what I'm presenting tonight. And then staff each year, I would not do it with each one of those local governments listed right there. I would check with Fletcher, I would check with Brevard, I would check with probably 4, maybe 5 of those local governments. I would check with them each year, and I would pick out 3 or 4 classifications and see what each one of those 4 or 5 local governments are going to do. Again, I wouldn't check with all of them. I would check with, again, those 3 or 4, see what they are going to do or what they have already done, and then just use them as the model to make whatever adjustments you needed to make. That's a very just a quick, easy way of just monitoring the market, just monitoring your neighbors. What did they do, or what are they going to do? They're going to adjust 3%. Okay, maybe we need to adjust our grade ranges 3%. But if you adopt this, again, I'm basing my pay grade range recommendations based on the current data projected 3% going into next fiscal year. If you adopt the pay grade ranges now, you're good for next year. Probably very close to being okay for the fall 24-25. But there's where I then would begin looking at, again, maybe Brevard, Fletcher, a couple of others, the county, and just keep pace with them. Whatever they're going to do, keep up with them.
Even though as a municipality, your tax base may not be the same, you just can't even look at that, can you?
Unfortunately not.
Because it's not a typical business model.
And that's a question I get all across the state. A lot of local officials will say it's not appropriate to compare us to Asheville. Well, you go ask any police officer, any police chief, or any sheriff how relevant Asheville or Buncombe County is. Oh. So it's not the size. It's who are those local governments and even private sector? Who are those that you compete with daily for employees? Parks maintenance specialist. I'm sure there's lots of landscape folks around here who would probably pay as much or more than what you see on that board right there.
So I've just got a handful of questions. They're pretty simple. Daniel's probably asked you way before now, but like, how much did this pay study cost us, if you don't mind me asking? Daniel?
I think it was $4,600. I'm not
Okay,
mistaken.
fair enough. That's all I need to know. I mean, because I'll get asked this sooner than later. How many years you been doing this?
50.
Awesome.
I did my first one in 1974, so I guess technically next year, in 2024, I will have been doing this 50 years.
Wow. Okay. Have you ever did a pay study like this and found a municipality was overpaying employees, or even if it was just one or two or a few?
Oh, yes.
And then what did they do about that? How did they readjust that?
In most of those instances, the position either stayed in the same pay grade, and those employees, based on that model, if their salary was already above where that model would put it, they don't get an adjustment.
Okay. Do you have any employees yourself?
Do I have employees?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. All right. That's all I got.
So I'll try not to sound ignorant about this. That's a lot of information. So you're like the maintenance technician 2 on the recommended plan is a pay grade 12. The town's been in existence for 20 years next year. And if we implemented the time of service on top of that, that would put the salary way above the maximum amount on that
No,
position.
there are no salaries above maximum.
But if an employee had been with the town for 20 years and we implemented the 1.5% per year, it would equal a lot more than the maximum.
Right. But there are no employee salaries greater than the maximum.
No, but what I'm saying,
You have personnel policies. Your personnel policies have language in there that no employee can earn more than the maximum of their salary grade range.
So would you cap the number of years you calculated the term of service? Am I saying that right, Daniel?
Mm-hmm.
Would you cap that amount to keep this from happening?
That's an option that is used quite often. Right now, we're recognizing every year of service that an employee has. In a lot of places I work, if we were looking at that same option, we would make recommendations that we recognize years of service up to the 15th year, up to the 12th year, up to the 10th year, or using one of the two models we looked at, the 8th year or the 10th year. And just focus on getting employees up to that midpoint range. So a lot of places I work with, those kinds of caps or limits are used pretty often.
So would they be, if a municipality decided to use, in your past experience, a cap on the term, on the length of service that we would count, what would be the reasoning behind that? What is most of the time the reasoning that they cap? I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, right now you've got an average years of employment of 7.6 years. 8 years might be something that you consider. 10 years.
Well, why would a
Why
municipality
would they
do?
cap it instead of having it?
Why would they?
open-ended?
Yeah,
Yes.
why would they? What would be their reasoning for doing that?
Financial.
Financial reason.
Once you get down to these kinds of options within options, you're talking about financial obligations.
Because if you have an employee that's been with a town for 30 years, I mean, and you apply this 1.5% per year, I mean, you can see the math goes kind of crazy after a minute.
Yeah, but except, again, you've got the rule that no employee can earn more than the max.
I understand that, but it's still setting somebody up for disappointment if they think that they're getting. You see what I'm?
Yeah, but if we want to get real technical about salary administration, the midpoint is actually the market value. So when you have employees technically who are earning more than the midpoint of a salary grade range, they're earning more than the value of the position. So there's where you would want to start putting kinds of limits on those adjustments that they would get. Your focus, again, in the theoretical world, is to focus on employees, getting them advanced to the midpoint, to that market value. And then if their salaries get really far above, they're technically earning more than the value of the position. But again, back, when you take a look at these kinds of options within options, there's where you're getting into, okay, do we want to spend $200,000? Do we want to spend $150,000? Do we want to spend $100,000? And that's the purpose of those kinds of options.
For going forward, your, like, specifically on this slide, your recommended grade is 12. And then to implement that, to get everybody to the midpoint, it's going to cost 100 and whatever thousand. That's, so in theory, next fiscal year, it's going to cost twice as much.
No. The 160,000 is the total annual cost.
Annual. For this implementation.
Yeah, so if you made those adjustments in a year's time, it would cost you $116,000.
So to change our books for this year, it would be a little over half of that.
If you implemented January
If we do
1st,
it now going forward.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it'd be about half that.
Okay, so it's not like it's going to be twice as much as that.
Yeah,
next year.
right, yeah. That's a year's work.
Yes,
He's showing us a year's work.
that's what the 116 is, the annual cost. And again, if you implemented January 1st, halfway through the year, the cost would be half of the 116. But then you'd have the full 116 in 24,
Yeah,
25.
yeah.
So who else has got questions for Mr. Hill?
Just gonna say that what I have seen of Google is where they cap out at like 15 years. And then after that, when they just get yearly bonuses. When they do raises, the adjustments, they just do like a one-time bonus. That doesn't raise the whole salary, it's just a
Yep.
bonus.
And that's typically what happens in Mr. Austin's question. When an employee's salary gets to the max, that doesn't mean that they stop getting increases. When they get to the max, they're still eligible for all the different kinds of increases that everybody else receives. They just receive it as a bonus, and it doesn't add to their annual salary. Now, for the retirement system, they still get credit for that payment. It shows up on their W-2. It just doesn't grow their salary beyond the max of their grade range.
So I've got a question or two for Daniel, but while Mr. Hill's up.
I think you touched on this before, so how long, so that we've paid you as a consultant for this pay study, how long do you think that it's good for? You said 3 to 4 years before you start looking, surveying other municipalities about the salaries, correct?
My recommendations are based on a 3% forecast of the current data, which gets you into next fiscal year. So you're actually making recommendations on pay grade assignments where everybody probably will be in next fiscal year. So you're good for next fiscal year, 24, 25.
So is the recommendation to implement this now or
No,
implement
no,
this at next fiscal year?
The recommendation.
This is just, I'm just giving you my recommendations for all these different options. The timing of it is not
Controlled by us, yes.
Yeah, the timing is not one of my recommendations.
My recommendation, as we discussed during the budget process, was to complete this fall with pay retroactive July 1st of this year. So that 116,000 would be the full cost to the budget in this current fiscal year. And what David is saying is because he's built in that 3%, that next year when we're looking at the budget, we wouldn't adjust salaries because we've already baked in that 3% to make up for inflationary costs. You know, like he said, other markets have already made adjustments in their salaries.
But this is for next year. So we don't
He's backing up. He
Backing up
just
to
said he's backing up.
July 1st of this year.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying this is a recommendation for next fiscal year.
And back up to effective
Mhm.
January 1st of 2023.
I know, but I understand that. But I'm saying that the recommended grade of 12 is what it was this past summer, plus your 3% to get you to next year. So in essence, we don't need to pay back pay.
Well, he's saying that,
No, you
make sure we're right here.
We're not out of line compared to this.
we are.
This is for next fiscal year. This is 3% higher than what it actually is today, correct?
Now, right now, for this particular classification, the market is 17.7% greater than you are. So just to catch up now, you would need to move this particular position from a minimum of 30,291 to 35,666, which probably would be grade 11
For this, for
right now.
today,
For right
yes.
now.
Let's get through this. When we would, if we took this pay study recommendation and we implemented it,
Mhm.
what you're saying is you had planned, you had budgeted, you had preferred that we back up to July 1st
Mhm.
and get everybody squared back up on payroll till today, then their next checks would be fixed within themselves.
Mhm. That's right.
So everybody understands that. We are discussing the potential, the possibility of backing this thing up till July 1st because we knew we had him order the pay study. And so that's what the manager is, just so we're clear on what he would prefer be implemented or what he had budgeted for to be implemented. Or that's another question, not to interrupt you, but if we elected to implement this, where is this money coming from? Where would you pull it from?
We already have revenues over budgeted numbers for sales tax and for interest on investments. You heard Carl talk earlier this evening about how far they exceeded numbers last year. We estimated for this current year interest on investments at $46,000 for the year, and it's coming in at approximately $25,000 a month. So there's more than enough there with just interest on investments to cover this back pay, including the rest of this fiscal year, and interest rates are predicted to stay relatively flat through the end of at least through midpoint next year. So I'm not worried about being able to continue this
For at least 2 years.
to budget for this moving forward.
But as a good manager, and I know you are, what would we do if interest rates, where would you pull this money from if interest rates was to go back down to say 2.5? I don't see them ever going back to where they was in our next 10-year period, but I just don't want to set us up for a situation where, I'm not saying it's not necessary, but at some point we're going to have to raise taxes. And I want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to prevent raising taxes. So if we look at all this up front, maybe we can see ways to save here or there to bring this money to where it needs to be spent on staff and other stuff.
Right.
And not wasteful spend anywhere, which we are awful good about not doing.
Right. No, I mean, we will look to the budget in the spring like we always do and figure out what our expenditures are for the next year.
Okay.
And if we have to find ways to save money elsewhere to implement this study, then we will certainly do that.
I'll just say a couple of things. So this is much more in depth than it was in 19 when we did it. It was a shock in 19. It would have been helpful to have, I know it was on the screen, but it would have been helpful to have the pay grades as they are today versus what was recommended side by side. We could have saw it a little bit better that way. I know it was on the screen there. I don't have a problem with this pay study because I know we are competing with the county and all the cities within driving distance. The only problem I have with it is not having a cap on the number of years of service. I can't go along with that.
And when we come time to make a motion to approve this, we can apply a years of service cap to it, if that's the way we want to approach it.
But I'm just speaking out loud here.
Sure.
Nobody else has said I may be in the minority about this.
Okay.
But if you wanted to see those kinds of modeling, I could have those to Daniel Monday morning.
Okay. Sandra, anything else right now that you think of?
No, well, I know that he said that, the size of the municipality doesn't matter. But when you've got larger tax revenue, you have a larger opportunity to pay. And some of it's in here, Asheville's 93,776. That's a big tax base. And then there's Fletcher's got 8,106. And they should make the same amount of money.
Well, I don't know how to answer your question. If you've got a position open here and a position open in Asheville or Fletcher or Lake Lure or any of those other places, what you're competing against are candidates, qualified candidates to come to work in that position. Not that they're coming to work at Asheville or not that they're coming to work at Lake Lure. You're competing for people who are qualified to come to work in a specific position.
What happens when you no longer afford?
I retired from North Carolina local government after 23 years of service. I still don't know the answer to that question.
At some point, you won't be able to. But I just wonder, if you want to compete with a larger municipality, and you're not a large municipality, how do you compete with that when they've got a bigger tax revenue and a smaller?
That's why when I come in and do studies, I don't cherry pick the highest paying places. I'm sure if I ask every employee in here, who would they want to be compared to, it's the highest paying places. I also don't come in and cherry pick all those that pay the lowest. You can see that group includes Asheville.
Well, I didn't know what they paid as a group. I was looking at the size of the municipality and tax base.
Yeah. And that's an appropriate question and an appropriate view that you should have of this. What I come in and do is take a geographic look. So I'm not, Asheville is on that list, but Asheville is just one of a number of local governments that are on that list.
Right.
So they're just part of that geographic average salary. So you're competing against the average, the geographic average. You're not competing Technically, for some positions, you're competing directly with Asheville. But in this comparison, I take data from each one of those local governments and I'm creating a geographic average salary. That's what you're competing against. You're competing against the average of the 35,666. You're not competing against Asheville's 41,850.
And honestly, we're looking at these numbers, and I know in something I looked at when I was looking at this on the computer at home, you're also looking at the private sector as well.
Yes.
And the possibility of these same people going into a private sector job, not even related to a municipality, that could do the same work.
We're blessed to have wonderful staff. And they do a great job, and I greatly appreciate it. I was just asking this question because what happens if it's a smaller town? Then when they don't have the tax revenue, luckily we're blessed. And we have good investments and we have good returns and everything. But if it's a smaller town and they have to match salaries like this to get good quality people, you know, how's that going to happen?
Well, and I can also get into a lot of studies that will show you the cost of turnover. If you're not competing, and again, you're competing geographically, you're not competing head to head, but what's the cost of turnover? What if any one of these employees left? And any one of these employees can go to work at any one of those other local governments. Well, maybe not Silva or Waynesville, but I'm sure probably most of them drive right past
Some of these.
several of those
Yes.
that they could go to work for. What's the cost of turnover? What's that value that you've lost?
What does that mean when a town can't hire anybody that just dissolve?
No. A lot of that is
That's right.
the size of the town also creates its own amount of employees they need. And then with the manager in that particular situation, setting a budget and then the council or commission setting the tax base to support it, it kind of just fixes itself.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yes.
Fair enough. James, what you got? Anything?
I'm good with it. I have some hesitation on back pay.
Well,
but I mean, you do this for a living. I do not.
I do it for fun.
The number you told me, I'm
if I
like,
did
you
it
did.
for a living, I'd be charging you more than $4,600.
Exactly.
Which is, by the way, what we paid 4 years ago, so
Okay,
you're getting
yeah,
a good
but,
deal
I
there.
mean, when you told me that, I was shocked.
And just to help me understand, if 70% of our staff had 20 years or more in the position and 30% had less, our year of service model would look completely different. Is that correct? I mean, the percentage is this tailored to to our staff, the way the years in the position, that type thing is, Randy's got me concerned, and so I just want to understand what the year of service model is. And I initially thought that this was tailored based on the 7.6 years in the position for our staff, and if we had a very mature staff that had been on for decades, vast majority,
Yes.
the numbers would look different in this model.
And that was the model I started with. But the cost of implementation of that particular model was significantly greater than the 116,000. So then we started taking a look at 1.5%, because again, the model is a 2.7% per year of service.
Okay, so the model remains unchanged, but the 1.5%, 3.5%, those numbers you sort of did iterative process and came down to sort of get everybody in the sweet spot.
Yeah.
Anything else? Since you just do this for fun, do you ever do them for council and mayor positions?
I do.
You do?
I do.
We might get you signed up. Anything else? Anything else? Anything you want him to bring us back? He mentioned he could produce, with a vision with the salary caps at a certain year.
How many municipalities do you see or do you know of that you've worked with that does put caps on the terms of service?
At least a third, maybe a little more.
I'm just concerned that if we have 10 employees and they're all maxed out at the top, that's not really, I know that's encouraging people to stay with the town of Mills River that we've invested in, and they've got time invested with us. I'm just concerned about the cost if we've got a group of employees that have maxed out the top salaries. Is that a legitimate concern, or is that?
It is, but the model we're looking at is you're not going to have employees reaching the max.
Do you feel the same way, Daniel, in that statement he just made? With this model, it would be hard for them to reach the max?
I mean,
I guess
So just
we
to-
seem to have some confused on this. It'd be nice to figure this out, wouldn't it?
So just at the mid-salary that you gave for the technician 2, the maintenance technician 2, if that employee had been here for 20 years, he would be well over the max. Outside of the policy that you can't go over the max. So I'm just saying, if we've got all of our employees are close to getting up there to where the max salary would be at, that would be kind of tough to take on the salary end for the town.
It would. Okay. Let's look at this one. This is the current distribution of employees where their salary is and within their particular grade range. So that one employee represented by the black bar, for that employee to reach the maximum of their current grade, now here I'll make a distinction. It will take that employee, that employee would have to get a 25% increase in salary for them to move from their current position at that midpoint to the max. But that employee's position probably went up 2 or 3 grades. So if I plotted that employee's salary based on back to the maintenance specialist, let's assume that that's a maintenance specialist currently in grade 8. And if I move that position to grade 10 or grade 12, that's moving that position up 5% per grade. So if I didn't adjust that employee's salary, who's represented by that black bar, but move their position up to grade 10, their position in grade 10 is going to slide way over to the left. And then even if they got a 25% increase, all that's going to do is probably get them back to about the midpoint of grade 10 or 12. So employee salaries would change. They're not moving across their current grade range. It would take a 25% adjustment for that black bar person to get to the max. But because their position is going to move up 2 or 3 grades, they're sliding back 5% for each grade that their position moved up. So then it would take a 15 or 20% adjustment for them just to get back to the midpoint of grade 10 or 12.
You're more confused now than you was?
Absolutely. I can see where I see what you're saying but I'm still having trouble.
Right.
So,
But it's like if we took the bottom of that scale, just left all the bars right where they were
mhm.
and moved the positions up 2 grades, 10%. We would slide that bottom of that graph over, leaving the bars right where they were. Every one of those bars would slide 10% to the left.
But is it fair to say, I think where they might be misunderstanding is the pay ranges that we have established right now are not going to be the same pay ranges we're going to have 5 years from now.
Correct.
So as those move,
Mhm.
we're trying to catch them.
Yes.
We're moving. We're trying to catch them.
Yes.
Well, that 1.5% that we're giving them for being here with us probably ain't going to even keep up with that.
No, all that
Is
is
that making
is
sense?
that one-time implementation.
It's
we're
that
talking
one
about.
time that I'm having heartburn about. It is. It's the one time.
But it's just because we're used to paying it the way it is. Fair statement?
And what I'm saying is if we've got a mature workforce that is maxing out at their pay grade, that's money.
Right.
That's money.
And of course, it's easy for me to stand here and say, they're not going to max out.
But at the model, I'm a simpleton. At
Okay.
the model that you gave me,
Yes.
it does. They will max out within 17 years, probably.
Except in most places I work, once an employee gets to the 8th year, you can see that this model continues that approximately 2.7%. But then it starts slowing down. A lot of places I work at will develop a model designed to get employees to the midpoint. And then after that, that model goes away in some places, or the advancement after the 8th year is cut in half. It's reduced significantly. So there's all kinds of usage of that particular model, but it's primarily designed attract employees, retain employees. So market competitive, attract. Advancement, retain.
I understand.
To get them, focus is get them to the midpoint. And then, and again, a lot of places I work, they'll shut it off at that 8th year. Employees, again, are still eligible for increases, but they come in the form of a one-time bonus check.
Okay. All right. I'm through. I'm finished. How are you?
But then there are some places I work at who continue the model on for 20 years.
Anything else? James? Anything? Okay, anything else?
You were last, weren't you? I'm done.
So I'm gonna ask one more time before Mr. Hill steps back. Are we requesting any other information from him? As to what it would look like as a cap. He offered that as a service to us.
I'll do an 8-year, I'll do a 10-year, 15.
That's fine. Yes.
Okay.
And you could see. Fair enough, please. Thank you. If nothing else, I'll turn it back over to Daniel to see where we go from here.
If you want the additional numbers, then you would just table this until your next meeting on December 14th.
With everything else, huh?
Yeah, right now we are. I mean, we're just, I know, it's 10 now, but I mean, but I'm just the mayor. I'll do whatever y'all want to do. I'm with you. You tell me what to do. Seeking more information. We're feel we need it, we probably should seek it and get it. Look at it.
The other option is, as we discussed in the budget process, if you give me a dollar amount that you're comfortable with for implementation, I can work with David to figure out,
But see, me personally, I don't know if that's fair.
Okay.
I mean, we hired him. He
Mhm.
does it for fun. He charges little, but he give us a lot of numbers. I mean, a lot of good
Right.
information.
Mhm.
And if we're not, we're just going back to our old school ways somewhat.
Mhm.
We didn't get it till.
That's true. Well, we got it I got
Yes,
it on it last night or night before yet.
Mhm.
So,
But I can have that as different models
Monday, Tuesday.
Monday.
Okay.
I'm sorry, it's just.
Well, we're trying to look after approximately 8,000 taxpayers. So
Sure.
you see what, we're just trying to
Absolutely.
make sure we're doing the right thing. Okay. So we'll look forward to seeing those on Monday. Daniel can forward
Yeah, I'll
to
get
us
'em-
by
I'll get 'em
email
forwarded out
Monday
to you.
night. And do you need this one by motion to table it? Okay. So we're going to table this and 14th. And we'll try to, I'm sure you're traveling a pretty good ways, correct?
2 hours.
Or do we need, the council or staff think we need Mr. Hill back on the 14th to make a decision, or are we just gonna look at what we got? He works pretty cheap. I hate to run him all over the country.
I'll buy him dinner.
What do you think? You mind him being here? You mind coming back?
What is that date?
December 14th. We can put him early in the agenda process.
Mhm.
It's up to you. I mean, if you've got prior obligations, we understand.
Why don't we just tentatively plan on that, and I'll talk with David
Okay.
on Monday, and
Okay, fair enough.
it seems like you got most of your questions answered. It's just a matter of
I
where
think
that balance between years of service is.
I think so. Okay. So tabling it till the 14th?
I'm okay with it.
Okay, tabling it 14th. Thank you, Mr. Hill.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Once staff gets caught up, we'll move ahead with the town clerk's info.
I don't have anything further.
Arlene, tax collector?
Let's see, as of, the end of October, we've collected a little under $890,000. We're fairly behind last year, but last year was really, really good year at this point. I'm expecting, I've had the State Employees Credit Union pay all their escrows, and I'm expecting some really big checks next week.
Next week's a week.
So
Okay,
the end of November will look better.
good. Okay. Anything else? Nicole, Parks and Rec?
Just a few things quick. November 14th, we're doing a free plant giveaway here at the park. So from 12 to 6, one of the, just the benefit of good fortune, I guess, is one of the local contractors with DOT they're behind and they weren't ready to plant all their plants that they had purchased. And so they've donated them to the town to give away to be planted in the Mills River area. So some really good stuff. So it's from 12 to 6 on Tuesday. Also next Monday, we're doing a Mills River Road cleanup, so we're looking for volunteers from 1 to 3. We're going to be doing Hooper Lane. There's a lot of trash and debris.
When is that now?
That's next Monday, November 20th, from 1 to 3. We're doing a roadside pickup, which will be really good. And then also, of course, December 9th, Santa Claus is coming to town, so save that date.
Is that the litter pickup? Is it going to be on our website so people?
It is, it's on our Facebook page and everything, so you can check it out.
Mr. Malchuk?
Nothing from me.
Okay, Daniel?
I'll just throw out there that I've heard some concerns from council members about the plant giveaway and some invasive species. And so, Jeff, you've been nominated the resident expert on invasive species. So where the two plants of contention are St. John's wort and Virginia creeper. Should we throw those in the dumpster?
Can I just clarify, one, we don't have any Virginia creeper, so there's.
Oh, we don't? Okay.
In the St. John's worts, there are multiple varieties. This is a native plant. These plants were actually purchased in partnership with the Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation, who granted money specifically for native plants. So I feel pretty confident about that. If anybody would like to see the list, I have it. So, you're good. Sumac? Yes, yeah. There's 3 different species. So there's the shining, the smooth, and the staghorn. A lot of these plants are really good, particularly if there's individuals in Mills River that live along riverbanks or have steep banks, which is one of the reasons why they purchase these, is because they're really great for holding in banks and preventing erosion. So yeah, there's a lot of really, really good plants. A lot of that we have here in the park. So yeah. There.
Anything else?
Nope.
Okay, council comments.
I just want to say that I know a lot of staff is here, and I consider all of y'all my friends. I love the work that y'all do, and this is nothing personal, my questions or anything that I was asking tonight. I'm just thinking, I just don't want to set a precedent for the town to be behind the 8 ball years from now after we're all gone. So we'll get it worked out.
Daniel, you got anything, council comments?
No, I just want to talk about basic plants and we don't have to worry about those plants or vines growing amok.
James?
It's 10.
What does that have to do with it, Jeff? Okay, so that is a motion to adjourn, someone? Okay.
James?
All in favor?